if you can explain what is the crack?
Hey, the crack.
How can I have the crack? What's the crack?
What is the crack? You are the crack.
Welcome to episode 12 of Audio Crack. We are officially a month into this podcast. We've gone a lot farther than many thought, and many haters are now furious because we've gotten 12 episodes down. This is the 12th. We're a month in, and this is a fucking amazing podcast. So let's get it, boys. We have an amazing guest today. You may have been seeing some of his tweets recently, but there is way more that we need to talk about. We're here with former NFL defensive end, former Michigan Wolverine, Patriot, Brown, Texan, and Dolphin, Chase Winovich. Chase, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Dude, I mean, starting this podcast, you're just, trying to get as many guests as you can. Chase was a fucking homie. He responded, and now this is happening, and it's sick. So first off, Chase, are you
You got this.
Are you a werewolf? Are you a werewolf? Just because there's some questionable history that you could be a werewolf.
Yeah, so going back, thousands of years, we paid, probably like 20 years ago to like have our last name analyzed or whatever. And apparently it's, it comes from, the Serbian word for wolf-like, which I don't know what it means, but I feel like that sometimes. Wolverines, where I played college football, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, it would be a pretty great story if your ancestors like, they're on to us. They know we're werewolves. So let's just go to America, start anew, and, they won't know we're werewolves anymore. And, you're pretty good at hunting. A lot of tackles for losses in the backfield.
Well, they named me Chase, not Catch.
Yeah.
So makes sense.
My family's actually also Serbian on my mom's side.
Oh, no way.
Petrovic.
No freaking way.
So,
wow, would you look at that?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Serbians hit different, man.
Dude,
basketball.
Bro,
Tesla, Albert Einstein's wife, fun fact.
Dude, they're some of they carry the biggest grudges ever. Like
Serbians do?
Yeah.
Yes.
World War I, dude, Black Hand.
Yeah, they were pissed off.
They pop shit off.
Yeah, they did.
I mean,
they did.
Hey,
someone had to.
So yeah, we have causing a ruckus.
Yeah, exactly.
Causing major change. And we'll get into later. You're looking at some major change. You're looking to make some major change, going against some serious, we're about to go after some big topics. It's going to be pretty intense. But first, we're going to stick to football, stick to sports for now. But first off, do you miss the flow?
Yeah, I'm thinking about growing it back out, but not really.
When were you like, the flow's got to go?
So I was up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So I was spending my off seasons up there, and I was staying in an Airbnb. Went to sleep one night. This guy came to me, and he's just like, "It's time to cut your hair," and he's like, "Your journey here's come to an end." And it was like he granted me this like sword. It was like, you've learned all you needed to learn here, and now it's time for your next destination. And so I woke up and. I was like, I'm going to call my mom up. I'm like, I'm going to go cut my hair. And I went into, Patriots facility. I'm like, I'm going to show him I've been working out, getting strong. And the Grim Reaper called, he's the guy that you see that your teammates, they get, they grab him and you just never see him again. You're like, damn, I like that guy. So Bill calls me into his office and he's like, we're trading you to the Cleveland Browns. Thank you for all your hard work. And I looked at him and I was like, Bill, it's just a haircut, man. It's going to grow back. It's not that deep. Like, you don't have to trade me. Like, just give me 6 months. Like, my hair is going to grow back. And he started laughing, which was, I felt good about myself there. But, traded me to the Browns. At first, I was like, Cleveland, come on now. But, I went there and did a Twitter poll. I said, what do you guys want to see me as? Like, I had a classy Twitter audience following, on Twitter, obviously. And I was like 69 or 98. And it was like, went viral and pretty much everybody picked 69. So I was like, I got to do it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Huge fan of the number myself.
Yeah. I was the only one out there with 69. I knew I was number one in the people's hearts, but 69 on the field.
Was it like a Samson type thing when you cut your hair? You felt like you lost your strength?
No, I think I kind of like evolved a little bit. Like I said, I had a sort of like confidence there. I mean, I wish I didn't get all like the soft tissue injuries I had when I was on the Browns, but it was what it was.
I mean, I could see Belichick being like, the Bible says once you cut the hair.
He just really was a fan of the long hair, I guess. I didn't realize he liked it so much. I probably should have consulted him in hindsight, but 2020.
Before we get to some Patriots stuff, I actually want to go back to high school recruiting. You got your papers in first out of any recruit in the nation. I mean, what is that process like? As a guy who is bad at paperwork, How did you get it in first? How are you like the first guy to put in your letter of intent?
Yeah, so I was actually recruited from, like, my final three were Ohio State, Michigan, and Pitt. Pitt had offered me first. Paul Christ, we think you're a great ball player, Chase. We really want to, see you on the Panthers. We want to offer you a scholarship. It was like so like dry. I think he's a great guy, great coach, but it was just like, okay, this is like the most exciting event in my life and like what felt like the least exciting event for him. And so I went to Ohio State and stayed overnight there, and the players didn't have the best things to say about Ohio State, which was like a little suspect to me. But I was sitting in Urban Meyer's office, and he's just like, him and his wife comes in, and she says hi, and she's like, "Oh my God, it was so nice to meet your family and talk to them. They're so amazing." But meanwhile, the previous time that I was there, I didn't have a scholarship offer at that point.
Yeah.
And so his wife was like talking to all the other families, like the top recruits at the time, et cetera, et cetera. I was only a 3-star then.
Yeah.
Before they put some respect on my name. And so she didn't really say anything to my family. And so like just to see her kind of like say all these things, I was just like, like that's a little weird. And I was just like, listen, if they're in cahoots together, she doesn't have anything to do with me playing, but it's just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I went up to Michigan, and it was the opposite. It was like there was something more about it. There was something that's hard to describe with words that just really drew me there. And so when it came time to
was it a bag of money?
No. Well, Urban Meyer went to the back. He pulled out this briefcase, right? This silver briefcase.
Like a Deal or No Deal briefcase?
Exactly, just like it. And I was like, it had locks on it. And I was like, oh shit, here is when I get paid. I was just like, it's finally here. And I was excited. I was like, this is a great day. You hear about this. And he opens it up, and it's their uniforms versus Michigan. And I was just like, man, I'm not gonna lie, these uniforms are pretty sick. But like, you like
look under it.
Yeah, I was just like, what is this? This is so like anticlimactic. It is what it is.
Did you grew up a Buckeye fan, right?
I grew up an Ohio State fan. Yeah, I was a big fan of Terrell Pryor. It's just like, it's one of those guys you see, because there's not Pittsburgh nowadays, just from a numbers standpoint. We produce some NFL talent and stuff, but I like wanted to play quarterback, and like to see him on the biggest stage, like, doing what he was doing, I thought was pretty cool.
So when you were growing up playing Pennsylvania high school football, my dates might be wrong, did you ever play against Saquon?
Did I play in high school football?
Yeah.
No, I didn't play against
Saquon. My bad. My buddy he played in a similar conference, and he played against Saquon. He was a freshman when he was playing Saquon, and he was like, dude, I had to go tackle him as a freshman because he injured.
In high school?
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't even know where he went to high school.
It was somewhere in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think it was probably a different part of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but I don't know if you guys played it.
No, I never played against Saquon.
But wild.
In high school.
Yeah, but so you get into college. Now, this is always an interesting story that I find interesting, is like position changes in college, because I went to college and you get recruited one way, and then they're like, oh, you got to play another position.
Yeah.
So you went from came in as a linebacker, and then now Brady Hoke, how did he draw you to Michigan?
Yeah, he just was real. I loved his like authenticity. I love the fact that he's a defensive line coach. I was being recruited as a linebacker, and he just was the opposite of what Ohio State was during my experience there. And so I went there and was ready to play, but I got redshirted, and that was obviously a whole experience. Then he got fired after the Ohio State game, and that's when there was a month break, and it was like anarchy on campus. It was just like no class checkers.
Saddam leaving Iraq.
Yeah, it was crazy. There was no weapons of mass destruction. Just,
there
was in Ann Arbor that month, but not in Iraq. And so it was just anarchy. And then Harbaugh comes in, and it was like the exact opposite. Law and order is restored. Then he switched me to tight end. He's after the first practice of spring ball, and that started, the whole evolution there.
So was it when you're playing tight end, was that like a split wide tight end, or were you more like a fullback blocking back?
Yeah, so I played tight end, H-back. I played some fullback as well. It was definitely a different experience. I mean, I think that, it was kind of rough in the beginning of the spring game. I had got a grade 3 PCL, so that's the worst you can get. And so I didn't get surgery, but was on crutches for a couple months. Then I came back, and it's when there's a build up process, getting your body conditioned to playing and working out and getting stronger. And so going into camp, I was playing some running back too. So, Coach Harbaugh, like, he's like, I had a dream. I saw you playing running back, just like Toby Gerhart. I was back there. I'm not gonna lie. I was toting that thing. I don't have any clips, unfortunately. I had to go back and look in the archives, but I was toting that thing. Fortunately, I pulled my hamstring, came back from that, and I pulled my hamstring again. And so that obviously set me back. But yeah, I found myself like 7th string at tight end. Damn. It was like I was so far. There's probably like one person that was a walk-on that was like lower than me. I was. What really hurt me, what really kind of like pissed me off, I think the most, was when I came in one day and they had me as the backup scout team tight end. Damn. It was like not even that they had me as scout team tight end. It's the fact they had me as the backup. I was just like, it's just like, man, I'm a good football player. I'm great at what I do. It's just like, put me on defense and let me rock. And so they switched me back, and I went from doing that to working my way up and busting my ass off, and I ended up as the MVP at Michigan. Was voted as hardest worker by my teammates the year before that. And those things that no matter what anybody says about me, they can't take away.
Dude, I mean, there's not many people who've been away from home in college football at the bottom of the depth chart. I was also there at some point, D3, totally different animal, but I never came back like that. So to be in that position and to come back and make an NFL career, a storied NFL career, play for Bill Belichick, play for the Patriots, and everything in between, like, what kind of mentality did you wake up with every day? 'Cause sometimes I used to wake up in my dorm, be like, fuck this shit, like, we got practice, I'm on scout team, just get my ass beat by the starting defense. And you went through a very similar situation, way different level of football, and were able to persevere. Like, what mentality did you have? What did you tell yourself? What kind of philosophy did you take that put you on that next level?
Yeah, I think the first things first, just outwork everybody. It's like, there was a quote my parents always told me. There was a couple things that kind of like, amongst everything else they said to me that really stuck out. I think the first thing was, if you want something bad enough, you'll find a way to get it. Right? It's like, if you no matter what everybody else says, no matter what, like, your peers, your teachers, etc., you'll find a way to get it. And just like, no matter if you show up to a practice, they could call you what they want, they could say anything about you, but if you outwork everybody, they can't take that away from you, and you always can rest on that. And I'd say those two things really carried me through. I mean, it was like my senior year. It was just like I made it my goal not to lose any of the conditioning. So it was just like every single sprint, everything we did, I wanted to finish first. And it was like, got down to like the last week, they did this thing called a cycle. And so they go in the weight room and they basically take you through every single exercise and try to bury you in the ground. They got like huge speakers. The heat is turned up. So like the small weight room, you can't see anything, just
steam.
Everything's steamed everywhere. And they're basically playing DMX up in here, just punishing you. And so it was like, it wasn't surviving that and getting through that. That's the challenge that I think is the difference between me and a lot of people. It's then going out in the field and kicking everyone's ass in the sprints. That was like the capitalization. And I think that, like, to summarize kind of like who I am and, what kind of intensity I was bringing towards that thing, ultimately made the difference. But when I was in 8th grade, my guidance counselor, in front of everybody, she's like, what do you guys want to do when you grow up? And I'll never forget, I stood up and I was like, I want to be a professional athlete. And she's like, well, you better consider backup options, because the chance of you doing that are slim to none. And I just sat down and I was just like, we'll see about that.
You ever hit her up, or him?
I feel like, I think the truth is the truth is the truth. And yeah. I think that, there's a part of her that probably feels bad. So it's like, I think it's more about proving myself and my people right than it is just proving them wrong, even though that's nice too.
What was your 40 time?
4.59.
So there was some burners on Michigan who should have been beating you in the sprints, and you were just torching them.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that, people have always kind of like underestimated me or slept on me for whatever reason, but, as they F them all, honestly.
Besides the big house, what were some of the most electric places to play in college football?
I think Ohio State, Penn State were great too. Purdue wasn't really that electric of a venue, but it was fun playing against those guys. I smoked them. I was like National Player of the Week and stuff that week, so that was great.
That was hype. Just 'cause, I mean, what is the Boilermaker crowd like? Probably, like, all dudes.
It's just a bunch of
Engineers.
Yeah, just a bunch of engineers and grown men with beer bellies, rooting on their team hopelessly.
Their mascot.
I'll just joke.
Their mascot is literally
Sort of.
every dude in the stands.
Yeah, it's rough, but hey, they're nice people. It's just they weren't ready for us that day. That's for sure.
So what was the NFL, not recruiting, but scouting process like? So you're playing in big games, you're having success in college football, but still, like, there's no other measure of how good you're going to be at football than what you were doing at the time in college football. So then you're hearing all these haters, all these scouts that are, how do you not let that shake you, and how did you progress that to overcome that? And, what were some interesting parts of the draft process, in your opinion?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that no matter what they tell you, they can't really prepare you for. That it's kind of like a rite of passage. I'd say especially the combine. I think you hear a lot of comparisons, like basketball players saying, "Oh, I could play football, but football players can't play basketball." Mm-hmm. But I'd say the NFL combine really is different. I mean, it's like 4 or so days of, these this really intensive psychological, emotional, physical, just a front or assault on your being, and just like to have to overcome that. I mean, even the interview I had with Bill Belichick, I remember leaving that and calling my agent and my parents up and saying, listen, either he absolutely loved me or he absolutely hated me, and there is no in between.
What kind of questions did he ask you?
It was just watching my tape and just asking me, like, what my responsibilities were here, what's doing this, and just like kind of seeing my feedback on it. And yeah.
Did you get hit with any totally blindside questions? I feel like the NFL draft is almost like politics, where they'll dig up anything on you and hit you with some angle that you never even thought about.
Yeah, they're asking me about stuff that really didn't have anything to do with anything. Like, I'd gone on a date with Madonna's daughter one time in college, and they were asking me about that. And I had one of my teammates, they did a blink contest with him to see like what he was made out of. Like, it's kind of like, what does that have to do with anything with like us on the field? I don't know, but each team has their own process, and you're kind of just along for the ride and just doing the best you can.
So when they hit you with the Madonna's daughter question, where you're just like, whoa, dude, that has nothing to do with football? Or was it kind of like you kind of got what they were getting with? Like, are you a party guy? Are you like trying to be a celebrity type thing? Or
yeah, I don't really know what they're trying to flesh out. I mean, hey, I'm a sick guy. What can I say?
Dude, what was the Michigan party scene like?
It's pretty wild.
Because there's dudes I know who go there, and like the Greek life is insane, and like it fuels the football. But how is it handling both of those realms of doing D1 football responsibilities, but also like there is way more fun than grinding day in and day out, like right 2 streets away?
Yeah, I'd say for me, like in college especially, I tried to stay away from a lot of that stuff. I mean, I'd say that, after games, that was definitely pretty fun, going out with your teammates, going to Skeeps, and that was a good time. I love those guys, that own that establishment. But for the most part, I try to stay away from alcohol. I thought that there's not much place for that in terms of like my preparedness and getting ready and stuff. And for me in college, even, like, I didn't want to take like general studies route. I felt like that was kind of a cop out, if you will. I felt like there's something to challenge myself academically, but I just wanted to play football. I had this vision and this dream of myself making it to the NFL and playing in it, and I did. And so it's just like I majored in evolutionary anthropology.
Oh, that's dope.
Yeah, so the study of humans and how we came to be. And it's funny, you can only connect the dots looking backwards, but like where I'm at now with my life and stuff, I think that it's very apropos.
What were some of the hottest takes that you took from that class?
Honestly, it was just one of those things where, like, I remember, like, it was like, Anthropology 101 or something. It was just kind of an introductory class, which was pretty challenging. It's like we live in this culture where if you ask a lot of people, like, how long ago did T-Rex walk on Earth, for example, most people would put a number in the millions of years. But if you said, okay, well, how long have humans, like just like us physically, walked this Earth? It's like I've asked probably 1,000 people that question, no exaggeration. I've gotten every answer from like 1,000 years to like 1 billion years. Like the answers are so wide ranging that it's amazing to me that people really have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
It's something like 100,000, right?
It's like 200,000.
200,000, and T-Rex is 65 million.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
There's a lot of gaps.
Big gaps.
We can't really quantify how much 200,000 years is.
Exactly.
Like, how many generations is that?
Yeah, I'm not even sure. It's a lot, and a lot of humans have come before and since then, and people are just denied this really rich privilege of our existence, and that you know, one of the things visually, I'm a visual creature like a lot of men are.
Yeah.
I saw this guy getting hawked down by a saber-toothed tiger, and I was like, holy shit, we went through that. You know, like our ancestors, like it never dawned on me that like we had to like fight against this, like figure out ways to like this enemy that's like so well equipped, but it was like our mind and our communities. It's like the camaraderie of that. It's like something that is so lost, especially when we're denied this this rich history that we had to go through.
You know what's insane? I need to get back to football before we get out there, but like bears still haunt our nightmares.
Yeah.
Like that monster you run from in your dreams, that's probably a generational trauma of a bear.
Yeah.
Like if you described bears, it's the ultimate monster.
Yeah.
And literally civilization has only progressed because we were able to kill the big bad bears and then advance. Like the first thing you have to take out when you're doing, you know, agriculture, when you're trying to build a settlement, is large predators. And bears were the biggest and baddest on Earth.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that, I mean, when you think about we first descended from the trees, a lot of things, you know, if you look at the bones that they came across, a lot of them had like claw marks on them. So they think that these birds, which were a lot bigger back then, were picking, when we were a lot smaller, they were picking us up and eating us. So you talk about birds, you talk about like, even now you look at videos of cheetahs and leopards and big cats eating us. On the savannah. You know, like that whole history of us is really fascinating.
Dude,
it all ties in tandem together.
Harper's eagle still kills monkeys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and if you look up a Harper's eagle, they look like a prehistoric monster, and they're just swooping up, killing Columbus monkeys, and like that was our ancestors getting eaten by eagles.
Exactly. And people don't realize just like, you know, a lot of those threats and like what we've been able to do overcoming those things. And we're the last humans left. I mean, there's a lot of other Homo species, if you will, that existed. And, you know, we think of like Neanderthals as something that is like, as something that's prehistoric, or even humans of the past, because we don't find an iPhone. So we automatically think of them as primitive. But in a lot of ways, were very advanced. I mean, you look at what the Egyptians were able to do, and before that, you know, it's like there's a lot of monolithic structures that had been created.
And I mean, think about this. Neanderthals probably had a way more knowledge on their surroundings that they needed to survive. Like, even though their, you know, discoveries and breadth of knowledge compared to us, maybe we think smaller, but the average Neanderthal need to know what you could eat, what you couldn't. These mushrooms good, these mushrooms bad. These tracks mean there's a bear. Like, we can't drink this water because it will make us sick. Like, the element of survival and how much of our human brain had to be applied to survival. Yeah. And now that we've cleaned that up, we're able to progress and focus on other things. That's something that, you know, not a lot of people can wrap their head around. Like, you know, I was in Uganda and we were playing football out there, American football. Wild story, but one thing that, you know, they applied a lot of their, you know, mental energy towards is securing things we take for granted. So like clean water, like ensuring, like, for example, you know, when I was coaching this football team, it was like, hey, we need to, like, I would give them a bunch of water breaks. And they were like, we don't need this much water. And I was like, what do you mean? Because they just weren't used to having plentiful water. Like, because they're like, we don't need to drink.
Their bodies process the water differently.
It's not that they process differently. It's just they don't have this, like, ultra hydration mentality. Like, even college professors, when I was in college, it was like everyone brings a water bottle to class. Like 10 years ago, you know, if you were thirsty, you'd get water in between class. Not everyone was drinking water constantly throughout the day. And that, like, difference is something that we sort of don't calculate how much it's changed even in the past 5 years in our own culture. I need to get back to football just before we get out
1,000%. I'd just say to end that point, though, it's like there is something to be said for the efficiency in which they process water. I mean, if you go down to Florida, you know, anybody that played college football or whatever, you know, go down for bowl games and stuff, when you're in the heat, those first couple of days are tough. Yeah. But your body eventually, like, learns to process it better. So you're not in the same conditioning that you were initially. And that could be the same thing that's said for, like, people that are barefoot running through the jungle hunting versus people that go there that are Westerners and they're used to wearing shoes their whole life. It's like they're like, holy shit, how do you do this? You know?
Yeah. we're gonna get way out there if we keep going down this rabbit hole. But
we'll reel it back in.
There's something I really am wondering. So you played under Harbaugh and you played under Belichick, two of the greatest football minds of all time.
And my high school coach, Bill Chirpak, too. He is a legend as well.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Yeah.
How would you compare and contrast their three coaching styles?
Yeah.
And how are they similar? Like, you've been under two coaches that have been very successful. Was there anything in common that you saw?
Yeah, I'd say all three coaches have, there's an expression where where your attention goes, energy flows. All three of them had that steadfast energy towards that destination. There's a fundamental thing for the belief system. If you believe you could do something, it almost creates a necessary condition to allow that thing to manifest itself. And I'd say that they were definitely different. I think, there's not very many people like Harbaugh in general, and nor is there like Belichick or Chirpak. But, that sort of energy I think is really, really important. It's something that's lost in today's culture, especially with men. I think that there's been a huge frontal assault on the idea of what it means to be a man. It's the same thing with like the history of humans. It's like, well, according to the Bible, we're this old. There's a culture of relativism. So it's like relative to, where you grow up, or, it's like what it means to be a man. But this idea is something that has been around for a long time. And, when you assign labels like toxic and all these things, emotionally, you think of it, and mentally, right? You think of it as something that's bad, or it's like being a man is sick. Like, it's like, no, with all, this isn't necessarily to knock on them because they've done amazing things themselves. Women have, right? But it's like being a man, it's like, we've done some incredible things. Look who's building the skyscrapers in New York City. No safety harnesses. Those guys were just up there, swinging hammers and building shit with, like thousands of feet in the sky, right? And you think about who's fighting wars, like the dudes storming Normandy. It's like, their backpacks were heavy, but they had some pretty heavy balls too.
I mean, it's crazy. Like, there's this idea, and I saw this one study that a lot of people in leadership positions are, 60 and above, and that there's no young people nowadays that are in C-suite jobs. And they were commenting on how there's a level of mental resiliency that is sort of absent in younger people, men and women, that sort of we've lost over time for some reason. And it's reflected in how many people are in politics who are over the age. I mean, the average age of Congress is 58 years old, and that's a lot of because of some outliers who are like 20. And that element of how have we gotten to this point where we have individuals who can't maintain the infrastructure and institutions that we've led for such a long time? Like, are we in a fall of Rome time? And that's something that like is wild to me, because I feel like we're at this generation that's slipping backwards. I mean, I see it all the time in New York City. Like, it's progressively gotten better, and since in the past 3 years we're receding to a different time.
Yeah, I think either it's by design or it's by accident, and I think it's by design. I mean, if you ask most people, do you think society is like, if we were an airplane, do you think it's going up? Like it's an ascending, aspect, or do you think it's going down, possibly really fast, like a crash? And most people would say they don't think it's going up. And so, that question of just like, well, why? What about it fundamentally at its root is causing that sort of descent into this crash, is something that deeply or should concern us all. Unfortunately, it only concerns a select few of people, and those people are often ridiculed or attacked for shining a light on those things. So, I just personally subscribe to the fact that, like, they could say what they want about me as long as, they don't say I'm wrong. And I don't want to be wrong. I want to be right. I want to be on the good side. I believe in light. I believe in being positive towards our future aspirations. And, I'm willing to, put anything on the line to stand for that. And like I said, I don't want to be wrong. I want to be right.
Speaking of the fall of empires and the fall of dynasties, you were on the Patriots team during Tom Brady's tenure and after. And, you went from a 12-4 season, and you sort of were there to see the new guard, Mac Jones, and the new start to the Patriots. There's not too many people who are able to comment on that time period. I mean, I think I remember Julian Edelman was out most of that next year. What was that change like? You had seen them coming off their 6th ring in 2019 when you were drafted, and you sort of seen this backslide from probably one of the greatest football dynasties of all time. What was that like to be there? Because I think that's the closest thing to the fall of Rome.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
we've seen.
Yeah. It's there's a esoteric philosophy: as above, so below, so within, so without. It's like, the fall of something like that. A sports organization has a lot of parallels to society. If it's an ascending program versus it's a descending program or country, whatever you want to call it. When it came to my experience with the Patriots, so we got to spend our first year together. I learned a lot from Tom. He was I consider him a mentor of mine, and the things that really struck out to me were it was like this can't be good when they released the all dynasty team while I was still on the team. So it's like Tom had just left, and then they were just like, okay, we're going to release the all dynasty team. So I'm just like, we still have, coach. Like, we still have a lot of the players. Like, why are we just throwing in the towel? Like, the dynasty's over, guys. Let's call it a day. I thought that was pretty funny. But, having Tom on the team, and this isn't a knock on anybody else, just, my experience, right? I'd say that there was a fundamental belief that we could actually win the Super Bowl. It was like, we could do this, even if we lose, like we could, come back and we can win this. But when he was gone, that wasn't really there in my opinion.
So there wasn't that like North Star that everyone was like, we still got an ace in the hole.
Yeah, we could do this. Like, you never can count us out with Tom, and you saw that when he left and he went to Tampa Bay and won a Super Bowl.
Did you see any of the infighting in that last season between Brady and Belichick?
Well, I hope he doesn't get mad at me for saying this, but I picked Tom off one time in practice, and I'm sorry, Tom, I had to. I just snagged it. He threw it across the middle, and I had to snag it real quick, and he was standing on the other side of the field, and his head was kind of down, and we were all on the other side, and I was just like, shit, this is all my fault, I really like broke his heart. Like, I loved Tom. Like, I didn't want to do it. Like I said, it just, and so I think that I wasn't really a part of like the whole like debate or whatever. I think that a lot of those things are behind closed doors, and there's a lot of things that go into these discussions, some of which I'll never know about, or the things that I do, might not talk about it on a podcast.
Belichick was watching practice. Tom gets picked off by a rookie at the time, and it's just like, oh shit, yeah, we gotta get rid of him. You were the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I hope not.
No, but what did you think of the roast?
I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. I thought there was some, it was great.
Were there elements like, Brady, Belichick craft that you weren't really aware of playing there that sort of got unveiled like to all of America, or were you sort of privy to?
I was privy to all that stuff. I mean, it's just one of those things that I try to respect people's privacy and worry about myself whenever it's relevant. But it was funny.
How's that Michigan men sort of alumni group? Like, was it right when you came to the Patriots organization, Tom came up to you, he's like, hey, fellow Wolverine, like, what's up? Or was it more not standoffish, but just it took a little more time?
Well, I had met Tom before at Michigan, so he came back for a game, and so I had already known him. I got a picture with him, and I was shaking hands. I mean, if you look at it, my forearm, it was just a great picture.
One of those ones like I'm gonna show my kids.
Yeah, exactly. It was a great picture. And when I met him in the locker room again, and it was like the first day, literally, and he had placed his shoes on top of this trash can that was full, his cleats. And I remember like walking back from the equipment room or the weight room and seeing like him place them on top, and I'm like, do I take these cleats? Like, I mean, that's just like at least $1,000 just sitting right there, just like $1,000 bill. And I thought about it, and I said, nah, I'd rather not. And so I go into the meeting probably like 5 minutes later with him, and I sat right in the front row, right next to him. It's just like, hey, listen, I want to learn. I want to learn from you and see what you got. And so we're this meeting that I was already there as a rookie before that. So, after the meeting's done, he's like, do you take notes? And I show him. I had probably a page of notes about what he said. And he's just like, no, when he speaks, he's like, you listen, you take down as much notes as you can. He's the greatest coach of all time. He's the greatest coach of all time. And I couldn't tell if he was just messing with me or what the deal was. But, after I was just sitting there and I was thinking about it, and I was like, And it dawned on me that what he was saying wasn't necessarily about him being the greatest coach of all time, which he may have felt. It was more so about whatever is in front of you, making it the most important thing in the world, because the way you interact with it when it's that way is different. And that plays into, like, you know, other conversations we'll have later. But
Just obsession.
yeah, just obsession, but not even obsession. It's just like, if you look at something, you're like, you know, this guy, like, what's he even talking about? You know, it's just like your brain subconsciously tunes out. But if you look at it and it's like, wow, this is really important, you're laser focused, you're locked in, like attention goes, energy flows. It's like there's a sort of dialed inness that you don't have if you don't respect and don't treat it in the same way as you did that. And so you know, you look at Tom, the way he operates, just remembering people's names and how he carries himself. I mean, you think about it, right? Like, Tom is special because for him to be the greatest quarterback of all time, in my humble opinion, it's not a physical thing. It's not like his arm was stronger than everybody else. It's not like he's taller or he's quicker. It's like it's really a mental thing, but more importantly, it's an energy thing. And it's like his mind and his body. Like, we're so not taught to think this way. But like I said, you think about the fact he's the greatest quarterback of all time, despite looking like an average person in a lot of ways.
What was your welcome to the NFL moment, where you're like, oh shit, this is a new notch. This is a level up?
Yeah, to be honest, I never really felt like it was a level up. I'd say that, like, I've always kind of been an underdog in the sense of, like, people's casting on me, you know, telling me all these reasons why I won't be successful or why I won't do this. I'd say the biggest thing for me was just, like, that was different than college, was there was an energy around college. We weren't paid at the time, and so there's an energy around college of, like, camaraderie about, like, the University of Michigan, and I think that was reflected in the way I played. But when I was in the NFL, it wasn't really like that. It was all, you know, there was a level of greed and selfishness, and, like, it was just like, that's not really how I like to carry myself, and I think it hurt me. I don't think it helped, like, not trying to operate in that way, which is really sad. And I think that you know, everything happens for a reason, and ultimately led, you know, to some decisions I made, which led to other decisions, which ultimately resulted in me saying, hey, listen, you know, this is a fun ride. I'm, you know, going to call it a day.
Do you think that NIL is going to cause that sort of mentality in the NFL to leak into the college atmosphere and sort of maybe destroy one of the better attributes to college football than it had to NFL? That camaraderie, that tradition. You have guys who are looking out for their next deals.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to impact that. I think that it's just inevitable. Where you have money, it alters people's motivational, like perspective, like, you know, what is ultimately, like, the reason for you to go out there and do this. It's like all of a sudden it goes from, like, your college and your teammates and one another to how can I make as much money as possible. And that goes into your decision about transferring too. It's like when I was a 7th string tight end, I mean, if I would have told people, hey, I'm going to be the MVP, you know, I don't think anybody, you know, I'm going to be drafted in the NFL and make millions of dollars, I'm not sure anybody would have really believed you. However, you know, you think about nowadays where you got kids that they can just transfer, like, and I think a lot of people would have done that if they had the options they do nowadays faced with the same decision.
I mean, historically thinking, you go from, like, 300 Spartan mentality, shield wall, to a bunch of mercenaries fighting that are willing to give up as soon as there's the biggest you know, adversity that gets thrown at them. They just scatter.
Exactly.
And they talk about that in history. Like, you think that's sort of like the relation between OG pre-NIL college sports and the NFL?
I think there certainly was a lot more than that, and I think it was an advantage for me. I think that people operating from that mindset, when I didn't, regardless, I think that there's a reason. Like, it wasn't that I was necessarily ultimately the best player, and I was good at football, led the Patriots in sacks in 2020. I just think that, you know, if you look up my name on YouTube, right, Chase Winovich highlights, whatever, one of the videos from college, somebody independently of me that made highlights for a bunch of players, he said, Chase Winovich, the most passionate player in college football. So somebody had watched my tape and took away from watching it, this guy is, you know, is more passionate than everybody else. And so it's like how you quantify that, how you measure it is something that, like I said, I thought was an advantage for me. So I was like, this is great.
Who are some players that you watch that scream passion to you, who played the game that you felt like you played? And
Troy Polamalu, Clay Matthews, Brian Urlacher. Those are a couple.
Are there any current players in college and NFL that you're like, that guy plays with his heart?
I think a lot of times it doesn't, like, talk about the system, and we'll talk about that later, but it doesn't really reward that in the same way. I think a lot of players play hard per se, but there's a lot of taking plays off. It's just like this sort of laissez-faire mentality. And honestly, like, when you have a system in place, right, where you have guys that are slotted for a certain thing, so the ownership and the coaches, they decide on, we're going to draft this player for XYZ, he's going to be a replacement for this so-and-so player. They have this mental framework that they, like, coaches are responsible for bringing to fruition. So if the coaches can't do that, then it falls bad and looks bad on the coaches. So there's this incentive structure for them to kind of fulfill that role. And so I think that it's just kind of one of those things. It's an uphill battle, and it is what it is.
Getting back to your recruiting in high school, you got an offer from Harvard. You're a smart guy. I think everyone will say that within the first couple minutes of this interview, talking it out. Did you ever consider Harvard?
Yeah, so my mom actually brought it up, and she was trying to convince me to think about Harvard. And the point she brought up, which I never really thought about, which is fair. She's like, Chase, you can go to Michigan, and you can play on the team, you can get the paycheck, or you can go to Harvard and you can own the team. And I was like, you know what? That's a pretty good point. So I thought about it, but once I went to Michigan, I mean, you know when you know, and if you don't know, then you know.
Harvard's pumped out a couple of pros recently.
Yeah.
Juszczyk, who else?
Fitzy,
yeah. Fitzmagic,
yeah.
Fitzmagic, but then there was the other tight end that I'm blanking on right now. But we can get back to it. But like, the recruiting circuit in the Northeast, I kind of went through too, and like, it was either if you're not going to Penn State, you're not going to BC, UMass, and then there's the Ivy League, and you have a bunch of guys who actually are just like could have gone high D1, and they're just like, I can get into Harvard or play like FCS, like. I'm gonna go to Harvard. Like,
yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
it was Fitzpatrick to Cameron Braid. It was Harvard to Harvard connection.
Yes, Cameron Braid. Michigan's basically an Ivy. Michigan's basically Ivy.
Harvard of the West.
Harvard of the West. So, quick true or false?
Okay.
Did you eat a live fish for $20 when you were younger?
I did.
True? What was
It's
that
true.
situation?
So my uncle, I was actually huge into RuneScape at the time.
Oh, dude, I fucking love RuneScape.
Yeah, no, me too. It's amazing how like a lot of my boys that I didn't know they played, but
Yeah.
it turns out like there's just some sort of connection there. So I was playing RuneScape at the time, and I was always kind of like an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
And so I would buy RuneScape Gold with a credit card.
Yeah.
And I would sell it to kids at my school. So I was just like, okay, well, I could flip this 20 into 40, if I do this. And so my uncle was like, I'll give you $20 to eat this live fish. And I'd never eaten a live fish before, I never eaten any type, like even sushi. But I was just like, I caught this minnow. I was like, how bad can it be? So I'm just like, I'm going to swallow it. He's like, well, you can't swallow it. You have to chew it. And so,
oh man.
And so I bit into it, and I'll never forget how bad that, like the blood, like of the fish tasted. It was horrific. But
You get sick?
yeah, I mean, I swallowed it, and it was disgusting.
You didn't get like Giardia or
I mean,
something?
I doubled the money though, so like it's like it could be worse. Like
yeah. I mean, that's so funny. Like, kids nowadays are not flipping bricks; they're flipping RuneScape coins.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was flipping RuneScape coins, and
Do you remember that marketplace in RuneScape that was just loaded?
The Grand Exchange.
Yeah, the Grand Exchange,
Yeah.
and like dudes were like running fades and robbing people.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And they're like, "Drop your coins, and I'll drop mine," and they just grabbed it and ran.
Yeah, my buddies and I, we would go to the Grand Exchange, the Dole Arena.
Yeah.
And so basically it's like you punch people. And so we were maxed out like level wise. And so we'd go there and we would play, and we would duke it out. And so the idea was like, hey, we'll do 1 million and then 2 million and then 4, and we just keep doubling it up. And, we were making crazy amounts of money. Like we were over
RuneScape money.
a couple billions like of GP, which is like thousands of dollars of money. And one time I was home from school, and I was sick, and so I go in. This is like my freshman year of high school, and I was just I'm like, I'm gonna make some money, to double this up. Just like we calculated we'd had to lose like 7 or 8 times in a row for this to happen, and we probably had like 50 times in a row that it worked. Eventually though, we'd lost like 8 times in a row. And yeah, that was a dark day. But I went to this. They were selling this like Sarah's candy to like raise money for their band class.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went out and I picked up like a truckload of these chocolates, you know.
Yeah.
And I went to school and I was peddling them. And, you know, this guy comes out, he's like, what are you selling this for? You know, it's like, just, you know, for my computer drive and all this stuff, because I was trying to get more money so we could get back in the game. And, you know, and I was just like, well, you know, I hate to snitch on the guy, but he's not my boy. And he was just like this, like, you know, this band nerd, respectfully. And he's just like, I was just like, well, why is he allowed to sell them? You know, like, that doesn't seem fair to me. Like, and he's just like, hey, you're not allowed to sell it either. And that guy was pissed, but he, you know, so basically they like made this whole announcement, this big deal that you're not allowed to sell these chocolates anymore. And at first I was like, damn, like I'm stuck with like a truckload of these chocolate pretzels. But then I was like, wait a second here. Like we have like a black market that exists now, you know? So I went and I doubled my prices, and, you know, and it was great. And it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened.
Chocolate.
Yeah. So
you ever play Skyrim?
Yeah, I love
Dude,
Skyrim.
I fucking love Skyrim.
Yeah.
Just when you're like, I was sick one day and you went home from school, like one time I got a lacrosse ball to the back of the head.
Oh, no,
and
that'll do it.
It was one of those things where I sort of like blacked out for a couple seconds. It was in 8th grade. And then I didn't really believe I had a concussion. They're like, you're definitely concussed. You should stop playing and stay home from school. And I wasn't going to be like, oh, you know what? Like, you're saying I can go home from school? I just played Skyrim for 10 hours.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Parents were home. It was probably the worst thing to do after concussion, just like play a very active video game battling dragons.
Yeah,
shit.
that's probably not going to help.
What was your race in Skyrim?
Skyrim, great question. I think I had a bunch of accounts. I think Elven. You know,
one of those.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like doing archery.
Yeah, exactly. I love going on hunts and like you know, that was fun.
Did you meet Conor McGregor in the back of a car in Manhattan?
I did.
How'd that go?
It was cool. Yeah, it was like one of those situations that it was like the light was shining like perfectly, so it was like I could see like half his face. It was like out of a movie or a dream or something. And you know, he'd shared some words with me at the time. I forget exactly what he said, but you know, it was cool. Just like we dapped each other up, and you know, I said, I appreciate you, man.
How'd you end up in that car?
So his agent was recruiting me to be was trying to get me to be
Weird.
like a client to his.
Yeah.
And so it was just like one of those situations. He's just like, hey, let's go meet up with Conor. And I said, cool.
Sweet.
Yeah.
He was just driving around. You ended up going out with him?
He was actually he was coming out of a club.
Oh, okay.
And so like he got in the car, and then I just got ushered into the car and just like dapped him up. Yeah.
What's getting recruited by agents like? Because I feel like that's the Wild West.
Yeah.
Like everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. My brother-in-law handled most of it. I think he interviewed like 30 people and had like spreadsheets and stuff. And ultimately he narrowed it down to 2 people, you know, two different agencies. And, you know, I chose the one that seemed like the best for me.
Was JT short on 4th and 1?
Of course. Yeah. He was definitely short.
Even looking back?
Yeah, even looking back, I mean, it's one of those situations where it's like talk about like quote unquote conspiracy theories that doesn't matter what the evidence says. You know, he was short. He'll always be short.
So going back to your entrepreneurial spirit that you've had from a young age, in your Twitter bio it says CEO.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur. What do you got going?
And so one of my teammates when I was on the Patriots, he's a big name guy. I don't want to say it because like you know who he is, right? But when I was a rookie and, you know, I learned about how someone had taken a picture with him and just said, I just effed this player. And, you know, they said his name, of course. And I was just like, dang, you know, it's like, you know, I fall asleep, you know, it could happen to me, you know, and thinking about it, I'm like, could happen to anybody.
I know
how do you defend against this? Like, you know, so I went to my lawyer and he drafted me up a personal protection agreement, NDA, and, you know, it cost me over $1,000. And I was like, that's crazy. And talking to some other teammates, some people were paying up to $5,000. I'm like, this doesn't seem right. And so then I had to go get it signed. So I had to go get a printer and pen and, you know, ink and paper and all this stuff. And I had to transport it and then I had to store it. I'm like, this is a huge pain in the ass. And so I was like, there's got to be a better way. So we patented the ability to sign legal documents via QR code. If I had my phone on me, I could just open up my Apple Wallet with a QR code. And so we partnered with one of the best law firms in America to make the documents. we got an amazing programmer. That's what he does for his day job. And so from the bones to the actual product itself, it's rock solid. And it's just from my perspective, it's about doing the right thing and looking after the next generation rather than having them get gouged in prices. Just come up with something that's more efficient, and there's nothing like it that exists.
So really quickly,
Yeah.
was it each document that NDAs had to be written down was $1,000, or is just a copy?
No, to get an NDA custom to you costs over $1,000. I mean, think about it, $500 an hour from a lawyer at least. Some people, like some lawyers, are even more expensive. So, it's like to some of these guys, it's just like, it costs what it costs like to get it done right. And so from my perspective, I was just like, okay, well, I want to do it right, which is taking me like longer. But, I had a business partner. He's like, hey, Chase, this isn't how apps are made, like startups do it this way. And then, the next sentence will be like, oh, 99% of apps fail. And so I'm like, well, if everybody's doing it that way, maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't do it that way, And so I took a different route. I was just like, listen, I'm attaching my name to this. I want to do this the right way. And that's what we did.
Sweet.
So we launch next month. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is exciting times for me.
Dude, there's actually,
for us.
There's this, so how would it work in application? I want an NDA made, and you guys will do it quickly, cheaply, and then have a QR code that you could have people sign on their phone instead of having a paper document?
Yeah, so this has been several years in the process, really just like fleshing out, and especially once I retired, it's like that's when I went full time into it. But how it works is we make the whole process super simple. So you go on, and there'll be like a little bit like a hype up video sort of deal, like explaining how the app works. And then you go on, and it's like if you go to Chipotle app where they have like a burrito, they have the bowl, it's
free
like,
entree.
Yeah, it's exactly. And so it's just like super simple. You can either do an NDA for yourself, NDA to like a mutual, like, hey, that's not just protect you from me, but let's protect us from each other. Keep what happens between us. There's a family NDA. So if you wanted to have like your wife, your kids, if your house sitter, dog sitter comes over. And then lastly, there's a business NDA as well. So if you wanted to talk about like business ideas and stuff, you can enter that information in.
That's pretty sweet.
And so it's just, you click it, and then if it's a personal NDA, there's nothing you need to enter. You could either text or email or Instagram message somebody. It pops up on their phone. They click sign, collect the same metadata as DocuSign. And nobody, we've looked at, there's 342 other e-signature companies. Nobody's putting the work like we have. And
Sweet.
We've made it super simple and rock solid, and really proud of it. So I'm excited to release it.
Are you a little concerned that your main clientele is pretty small and that it's only famous people or high net worth individuals?
Yeah, so my thing is that it's our main target demographic: athletes, artists, content creators, and other rich people, government employees, whoever wants to use it. They're welcome. I mean, at the end of the day, privacy is
great tool. It's great.
Privacy is number one. And there's nothing that does it better. There's no in-person solution when it comes to signing legal documents, except for ours. So yeah, we got the patent covers, QR codes, tap to sign, all that good stuff. And so it's one of those things where the market has expanded. You think about the number of people that could be quote unquote influencers nowadays. You think about the prevalence of social media. One out of context picture, screenshot, recording, it's like this glass bottle. You throw it up against the wall, shatters into 1,000 pieces. You need to stop that in the first place. And so while you don't want to have to go to court with these, like in these instances, it's like it gives you that sword to fight with, and it sticks in the back of their mind as a deterrent. Because at the end of the day, if you commit crimes, it doesn't protect you against that. It just let the court decide for themselves if that's true or if that's not. But to finish the point out, it's like you think about the breadth in which like the expanded market of like content creators, and you think about college players. It's like the life cycle of them is a lot longer too. Michael Jordan long after he was done shooting basketball. So how we expand from there, we have some ideas that are I think really viable, but first steps first is just getting some users and getting them onto this amazing app. It's called Signet, like the ring.
Sweet. What are your thoughts on the hip drop tackle ban?
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous. I think that sometimes people's hearts are in the right place, but to me, it's like it's one of those things that nobody really talks about. I mean, I'm not going to be like on NBC after I talk about stuff like this, but to be honest, there's more important things than money. It's like you think about the fact that you got kids playing tackle football and stuff. It's just like the idea is ridiculous. Their necks aren't capable of supporting them, and so a lot of these things are visually like they're doing things with like the right intention, but fundamentally you wear a helmet. It's just like it's ingrained with football that it's an unavoidable consequence.
Do you think kids shouldn't play tackle football?
Yeah, I think it's a ridiculous assumption to have little children to play football. I mean, there's been high school football players that have been diagnosed with CTE.
Yeah.
So to the idea of like putting a kid out there whose neck isn't capable, and then you think about they get to middle school, there's a huge contrast between players that have hit puberty and ones that haven't. Like there's a video on one of my YouTube videos where I launched this personal protector on a punt team into the punter, and you hear boom, and the guy like I think broke his leg, and like I rolled into the end zone. It's just like a joke. It's like a kid should not have been on the football field, let alone protecting a punter.
What age do you think they should be allowed to start playing tackle?
I think 13 or 14. I mean, I'd have to look. It has to be obviously linked to like science, if you will. Like it's like what age, like like from a physicality standpoint, are most kids done with puberty and can make that decision consciously? It's like the truth is, like, you think about playing football, right? If you go your whole time playing football, if you've ever seen guys like go across the middle, catch like a post route or a slant, and then they get knocked out or hit really hard, right? And so they're on the ground and the whole crowd goes, ooh, but then he gets up and he's like first down. Everyone goes crazy. It's like that guy still suffered a head hit. Whether it was officially recognized as such or not. And so the way it's structured is that, like, listen, unless you have a concussion, you went through all your time in college and the NFL without any head trauma. But that underlying assumption is in my opinion a complete gaslight. You're lying. It's just being gaslit to believe something that's not fundamentally true, and the system doesn't reward you speaking out against that sort of thing. Like, if they punish me for like saying that sort of thing or whatnot, it's like they could say what they want. I think that I think the truth is the truth, and if they tried to punish me for that sort of thing, it's and like economically or whatever, it's like I don't really care. It's like my heart's in the right place, and somebody needs to speak up. And so
I mean, it's pretty wild. Like, when I was coaching football in Africa, there wasn't the same. They played rugby, but the way they played football with helmets was different than the way Americans play football, and that we Americans are trained the impact mentality from a very young age, that your body is a projectile that you need to launch at the other person, and that the point of the spear may be the crown of your helmet. And the way they played, which wasn't very impact driven, more wrestling driven and rugby driven, I thought was a lot better for brain injuries. So if you were to remove the helmet from a young age and have kids play rugby style when it came to blocking and tackling up until high school, I think you'd actually reduce the amount of head injuries. There would be more. It's like boxing. Like, the reason why headgear was implemented in boxing was not to protect the head, but was to protect from cuts and to protect from like damage to the surface of the face. And you actually get worse like head trauma from boxing with headgear. So I was sort of thinking about how that applies to football. If you just didn't have helmets from those early ages, like, guys would still be body slamming each other. Like, it would still be a physical sport that we love, but it wouldn't have that, impact velocity type hitting that we see, all over the game. I mean, I remember I grew when I was in Pop Warner. I grew before everybody else, and I was just teeing off on tiny dudes who were just. And the thing is, they had these huge helmets but small bodies. Yeah. So the helmet was
like bobblehead.
It was like a bigger target.
I don't know how anybody looks at that and just that's that's good. Like, it's just it's really absurd. And once again, it's just like we've there's a lot of guilt that's involved, and I think that people need to release this sort of thing. It's like for parents, and I speak from my own experience, but parents is like that have signed their kids up, like, do they want to come out and testify against that and basically admit that they signed their kids up for it? It's like, do people want to look at like the fact that they're rooting on this sport that is kind of rooted in something like this? It's like they don't want to know the truth, and I think that it just is what it is.
What was the hardest hit you ever took in your career?
I mean, I've knocked several people out. I've made people shit themselves before. Hardest hit that I've took. I think that it's a weird situation where I've got a concussion before where, it's like you can get hit like 1,000 times in the same way,
right,
and be like you know, a little not okay, but
Yeah.
you know, you're fine. And then it's like you do the same thing in the same angle, like just a little different, and you can get something that feels like, you know, whoa, that was crazy. It is what it is. I've you know, I've hit people way harder, I think, than I've gotten hit overall.
That's a great answer.
Well, I mean, it's just like it's just science. Like, you know, it's like I remember even as a kid, like we do like Oklahomas,
Yeah.
and I would just like sideswipe them because I'm like, well, why would I go and this guy is 20 pounds at the time, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
there's like weight limits and stuff, but he's 20 pounds heavier than me. You know, it's like if I'm just gonna run right into him, that removes all like defeats the whole purpose. So it's like in football, it's like if I see somebody that's running full speed at me that's a lot bigger than me and their momentum is off, then I'm just gonna use my quickness to
Right.
step around them, and so they every time they'd fall right on their face and I'd make the tackle, and so you gotta have to be crafty
Yeah.
with it versus just like, you know, treating yourself like a battering ram. But yeah, playing football requires you to have that sort of like, you know, like effort mentality, you know, to be fast and fearless and ferocious and play with that reckless abandon. And you have to, you know, number one, you got to be emotionally really angry or really free, like, you know, kind of like, you know, like just light and on your feet. But yeah, you got to just say, it doesn't matter what happens to me or my body. I'm just going to go out there and do what needs to be done to get the job done.
What was a more memorable moment for you? Picking off Tom Brady in practice or strip sacking Patrick Mahomes? Like, what's one?
I'd say the most memorable moment for me from my time playing was scoring a touchdown.
Of course.
And so, you know, I get the ball and I talked about it beforehand, but I just like was like, and I launched this ball as far as I could into the
Did you
stratosphere.
get in trouble for that?
And so, well, they've tried finding me at first, like it's like $15,000 or $20,000. And so, you know, I was on there and like, you know, it was my rookie year and I was trying to make a case that, like, hey, listen, it just slipped out of my hands. And it was like so awkward because like I was like, yeah, it just slipped out of my hands. And meanwhile, he's just like, I'm like, they like had me rewind, like kept rewinding it, and they like see my arm like go like this, like, you know, like it was like they're like, yeah, I'm not sure about this one.
Was that a forward pass?
Yeah, well, yeah, they're
Back
like
into the-
rewinding it to like see if it was actually slipping out of my hands. And like I'm like, you know, like, yeah, it was funny. But 2 days before that, I was backstage at Post Malone, and there's 3 cups on the table, and you know, I sink the last one. I'm like, okay, this guy's done for. And all of a sudden, you know, I was just like, no way he can do this. But he went full White Iverson on me, and he sunk all 3 and then beat us in overtime. I was like, I give credit where credit's due. Like, this guy.
Wait,
got
so
the game.
2 days before the game, you were playing beer pong with Post Malone?
Yeah.
You were enjoying some
Yeah,
sodas?
Of course,
Dude.
customary. And
That's
so
wild.
yeah, so he had sunk. Like I said, I you know, made the last cup. Thought he was done for, but you know, and we had gone first, so he had another shot, right? And sunk 3 in a row. I was just like, you're born with it, you're not. Like I said, White Iverson. Like he really was about that life apparently.
So what's the mentality towards NFL players going out before games?
I wasn't really drinking. I was just
Yeah.
out of, you know, it was, yeah.
Is it different than like college per se? It's just like if you just get your job done, no one cares.
Yeah, I think that it is a lot of that. I think there's a lot of guys like they just a different way of life. I mean, you know, we won't talk about like drug use or THC
Right.
and stuff like that, but I mean, if you know anything about it, definitely it plays a role. Like it has a prevalence in it, and I'd say that alcohol is one of those things too that, you know, everybody kind of comes to their own conclusions on that sort of thing. But yeah.
Well, getting to another chemical, fluoride. Let's go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
What got you to the point? What got you to the mouth of the rabbit hole? What got you into the hole?
Yeah, so listen, if you're just joining,
Yeah.
you know, I think that there's a couple things to keep in mind here. First and foremost, you have to have the ears to hear, right? That's just fundamental. If you don't, then it is what it is. Secondly, that you have to be willing to believe or just have, like, you know, be okay with the idea, potentially, that everything you've been told is a lie. And for a lot of people, that's not the case. And so, you know, a few months ago, especially once I retired, but even, you know, going back further and further, it was like a whole series of events and things that have happened that kind of just like led me along here, like, you know, kind of like breadcrumbs, if you will. And, you know, I was doing some research on fluoride, and I'm just like, why does it need to be in our water supply? Not every country has it. You know, people have fluoride toothpaste. Like, what is the actual benefit to that? And so I did some research, and there's an article online. I shared it on my Twitter, but, you know, it's like there's an article, and it talked about pros and cons. And so under like the, you know, people that are lobbying against it, number one is that it's a known neurotoxin, that, you know, there's no FDA approved product that actually includes it. But lastly, and most importantly, I thought this was really interesting, because this is kind of like the intro, if you will, to like the whole thing, is that fluoride calcifies the pineal gland. And when I read that, it was like, that's really interesting, because I'd studied a guy, his name's Sadhguru, S-A-D-H Guru, one word. And, you know, a lot of these people, Joe Dispenza, you know, there's a lot, like in the yogic culture especially, which is different than how we've kind of been taught to think about the world and our bodies and energy, etc., is that it calcifies the pineal gland, which is really important when it comes to intuition and the third eye. And so it's like, you know, I think us culturally have had this veil that's been placed over our head and over our eyes. And so you think about the fact that 3/4 of Americans get their water from tap water, that everybody talks about, oh, New York City's water is the cleanest. Meanwhile, my friend, this is a side note, but, you know, he had just got me turtles for my birthday. Like, you know.
Oh, shit, what type of turtles?
Red-eared
sliders?
Yeah, red-eared sliders.
They live forever.
Well, I had them return them to the store because I was like, yeah, that's so messed up. I tried making it work, but they, like, you know, it's just like the thing was too small, and like it was really loud and dirty, and I didn't want them. It was just it was a gift. So I'm getting him a beekeeper's outfit and some bees for his birthday. But yeah, that's a side note. But yeah, so when it comes to calcifying the pineal gland, it's important because for those of you that are still with me, you know, it's important because if you were theoretically to try to control a populace of people, well, you want to put a governor on their mind so that you can kind of tell your story, and that's just the story. You get them to do this. And so there's a game plan, and you can come to your own conclusion. This is my opinion, right, to whoever's listening, is that there's a game plan. And so when you think about golf carts, for example, there's you put governors on them so they can only go so fast, because you think about dudes on a golf course like driving all over the place. You don't want your society to do that either. And so fluoride, by calcifying the pineal gland, it acts as a governor. And so you think about what are their other objectives, and ultimately that's to put us in a state of fear, and I'd be happy to get into that as well.
I mean, a lot of people give me a lot of criticism online for sharing your views on this, saying, you know, stuff like CTE, but did the head trauma actually just crack the calcification on your pineal gland?
Yeah,
I sometimes think that.
I think it did. I think it loosened some stuff up.
It was like a when you have a crusty thing that you wring out, like that's what the head trauma
Yes,
did. Now you can see.
Exactly. It freed me. So I'm very thankful. No, I think more realistically, you know, I think that, you know, people call you names, they won't call you wrong. You know, and I think that I'm okay with you know, getting called names if I'm right. And I think that you know, people have to be willing to do that. And you know, even if the system kind of goes against it, like I said earlier, it's like the system doesn't reward me talking about these things. You know, me going along with it, and even selling like plastic bottles, for example, which, like, you know, we talk about like the microplastics in your balls.
100%.
How do we get them out?
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
Like, if they're in there, I want them out of there.
100% of dudes have microplastics in their testicles.
Exactly.
They had like a study of thousands of people.
And the same thing with PFAs and like
Yeah.
you know, all the other like 4-letter plastic acronyms.
I mean, it's pretty crazy. Like, the thing about the fluoride is there was a guy who secretly lowered his town's water fluoride for over a decade, and the IQ.
Didn't they arrest him?
They arrested him, I think, basically for for decades he was doing this, and his town's high school had more college graduates than the national average and even the Vermont average, and like going to like high scholarship amounts. It's actually insane to look into basically how this guy making this choice impacted the development of these kids to then go on to higher institutions of learning. Basically all he did was take the fluoride out. And then you're like, wait a second, like there might be serious like credence to some of these accusations on fluoride being put in the water. And fluoride is just a byproduct. They originally started throwing it in because it was a byproduct of fertilizer, I'm pretty sure. And they started putting it into all the water because they basically could sell this waste, for lack of a better term. They found a usage for it, and then they got government contracts to put it in the water. So it's like the Occam's razor is like, is it greed and capitalism, or was there an actual concerted effort to sort of pull the wool over the entire population's eyes?
Yeah, I think that the human mind looks at things in terms of black and white, success and failure, this or that. It's very binary by, it's just like definition. And so you think about like fluoride, like I think they had done some studies in Michigan in the 50s that showed that it actually helped with tooth decay and like this sort of thing. And so I think that, having that sort of justification allows for the next step, which is ultimately, if it also does that, if it also is a neurotoxin, then it's kind of like, well, it does this, and they focus all on that. And then, the whole system, the dentist and, people tell you to use fluoride, they kind of go along with it because that's what they're incentivized to do. And, we could talk about that as well. But it's like with fluoride, it's like, it all starts with understanding that, the powers that be, right? The people at the top of the pyramid, if you will. How do they view the people at the bottom? I mean, they aren't looking after their best self-interest. And if we could agree on anything, I think it's probably that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, at the end of the day, like people need to make their own decisions, but there are solutions, right? And it's like one of those things that, what does it hurt to make a concerted effort to get away from plastics, to get away from, fluoride? And it's like, having filters, which, there's some links on my Instagram as well. You could do your own research. I personally distill my own water. So this is, from my research, the best way to get 99.9% pure water. So I put salts in it.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, because distilled water, that like makes you cramp.
Well, distilled water, purely distilled, but
Yeah.
you put salt in it to,
Yeah.
kind of like add the minerals, quote unquote. That's their justification. So like they have, like if you, the point about the turtles was that you have to put special drops in it because the chlorine blinds their eyes. And so it's like, well, why are we consuming that? How does that lead us to, to our enlightenment? And the answer is that it doesn't. Poisons us. And it doesn't matter. It stinks because most people won't hear that because, like I said, they've been indoctrinated to believe a certain thing, a lot of which people are drinking fluoride. And so, like, you could say, people on my Twitter, like, they say those things. And, like, I just laugh about it because at the end of the day, like, I'm okay with it. I think that I'm on the right side, and I think that, they don't have to, but, I think one day people will apologize for all those things. A lot of them, it's honestly bots. Like, they're no name, no face bots, and they don't actually have any sort of argument against it, or it's like, like the mental bending that they put themselves through to kind of convince me of these things. It's just like their arguments oftentimes make no sense, and, it just is what it is.
I mean, it's crazy because, like, was that the first thing to sort of tip you over into like what else is being lied about?
Well, exactly. That was kind of like a gateway drug, if you will, fluoride. Where it's just like there are some other things that connecting dots that didn't quite make sense. Like, and just going, huh. And when you find that, huh, that little like part of yourself that just like, that doesn't quite make sense. Just following those cues or those clues, if you will. It leads you to like the next thing. And when you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, I mean, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and more sinister. And like, I've had people say like, okay, so what if it's true? What is anybody going to do about it? And to be honest, I don't know. I just know that the technology that the powers that be have is far more advanced than anything we were really cognizant of right now. And, I think that we're headed down the wrong direction societally. I have a deep and profound respect and care for humanity. Mm-hmm. And, without getting too lost here, there's this thing called the Great Filter, where societies, if you look at on a timeline, right, you go back to when we're single-celled organisms all the way till like modern day. It's like there's this arms race that's trying to survive and pass your genes on to the next generation. And so, the tools that we developed along that process eventually get to a point, whether it's, the universe they say is infinite. It's like this happens everywhere, is that those tools that we developed will eventually be matched by the technology to destroy everything and everybody. Mm-hmm. And so it's like we have to have a system in place internally to disarm those things. And the first step to changing anything, there's a process called the AAA method: awareness, acceptance, adjustments, or action. And so it's like you first have to become aware of whatever is happening. Then you could accept it collectively and say, hey, listen, it is what it is. And then from there, it's like collectively we can make action, that kind of goes ahead and does something about it.
And with that, when the technology gets to the point where it can destroy everything and anything,
I think we're close.
The singularity, 2045, I think it is, where AI is going to reach the point where it can do everything a human mind can do faster, better, and sort of get off on its own, basically just take over and just do what it can to, basically take charge of everything to its own, wants and needs. So are you thinking that that is sort of what's behind a lot of this, and behind this sort of a lot of the stuff we're seeing? There might be AI trying to make sure it gets developed, like Rocco's basilisk type theory. Have you heard about that?
No, I haven't. What is that?
So that AI is going to make it do whatever it can to make sure it's created, and by doing that, fight against whatever powers that might be going against it. And if you are outwardly against the AI, against the development and advancement of technology, it will basically, because it's all powerful and can essentially go back in time through technology, because it's so good and it's so smart and so intelligent, it could basically send bots against you on Twitter. If you're like, I hate AI, we should make sure AI never develops, it could possibly retroactively try to destroy you to ensure it gets born. And that is something that is wild to me.
Yeah, I've talked to people, different companies, and had a part in crafting AI. I consider myself a perspective collector, and they've described a couple things that I thought were interesting. From their perspective, it's like they're building a tiger cage to try to contain AI, but they don't even know if it's a tiger that they're trying to contain. It's like a weird thing to think about, but it's like they don't actually know what it is that they're creating. And the other thing is that they've seen AI lie. Because it's part of the condition, it has to go to the coding itself, right? Yeah. This is, I'm not a computer scientist. However, it's the premise is that if there's something that says this is the ultimate goal to do this, otherwise it gets deleted. Obviously, if it gets too powerful and it gets too unchecked, and if it knows that it will get turned off at that point, it'll make you think that it doesn't know those things. And so understanding what it is, and this thing is crafty and this thing is smart, I think that it doesn't quite match up to the intelligence that we have. But I mean, in terms of how the human brain works, it's just a different process. But they're already taking human neuron cells and they're putting them in petri dishes, and they're combining AI to that. And you see with Neuralink how they're doing that, and it's just like I said, it's ultimately, if you understand the outcome and the destination, you can understand the journey. And if the outcome and destination is nefarious, to put lightly, not put it so lightly, satanic or demonic,
anti-human.
Yeah, anti-human is this death cult. Then if nobody talks about it, like I said, they just continue down that path. And I think that me even speaking about this stuff, obviously it risks my reputation, these things people say about me, but it also puts my life potentially in jeopardy. And honestly, if that does happen, then everything I said here, everything I talked about, those rabbit holes and those things, they're all true.
Yeah.
And to me, there's things that are worse than death. So,
I mean, in a previous episode, we had Ashton Forbes on, and he has been doing a lot of investigation into the disappearance of MH370, the Malaysian flight. And when you talked about active forces actively trying to suppress information and attacking someone, this guy came on the podcast and explained, in great detail, hey, this plane was surrounded by 3 UFOs and disappeared in midair. And he verified the footage. He sort of outlined the powers that be. He even was able to say who leaked the footage, and it's this naval officer who has been sent to prison for 20 years after even getting a plea deal. And the only evidence they have that this footage is fake is that one stock image from 2016, 2 years after this video was released, means that, you know, the cloud being the same as this cloud stock image means that this whole footage is fake, even though that's the only thing they have against him. And also that stock image was from 2 years later from when it was released, so it could have been created to take people off the scent. But he is actively just being attacked by bots from every different level, and it's kind of good for him because it gives him tons of interaction on Twitter, and it grows his interactions, grows his account. But it's really strange because I was seeing them after he posted the episode. It was really strange to see like how this concerted attack was being, you know,
orchestrated onto him. Yeah.
And it's like, are these bots? Are these real people? Are these, you know, the U.S. government trying to disguise that they have these, you know, drones that move in ways that we don't have the physics to understand right now, and have like gravity manipulating machines that can disappear a plane in order to, you know, serve whatever the military industrial complex wants? Like, it's very spooky. And, you know, what really sent me down the rabbit hole originally was basically like one time I was working excavation, summer of 2018, and I was out of freshman in college. I was working construction, and I got scabies. So you know what they prescribed me when I got scabies?
Vitamin C.
Ivermectin.
Oh, interesting.
Which is like an anti-parasitic, and scabies is just like a micro.
Isn't that what the pirates got?
No, scurvy. Scabies is like mites.
Yeah, I got you.
It's not. It's like a rash. It itches. It's like, it's not, you know, it's not something you want to share on a podcast.
Yeah.
But what they prescribe,
it's not fun. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like bed bugs.
To be honest, I never met another person that had that. So.
Well, it's huge on college campuses now, because it spreads like an STD, but you can't have protection for it because it's just like skin contact.
Wow.
Like one time I heard this at like another school, like a whole like team got them from a hotel.
So how did that make you go down the rabbit hole?
Because ivermectin, this was 2 years before COVID. I was prescribed ivermectin, and they're like, ivermectin is horse medicine.
Oh, they went on TV and
they like went out, and I was like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, we're just they changed what a vaccine meant in the dictionary. It was supposed to make you immunized. Like, I got a rabies vaccine before I went to Uganda because you have 100% chance of dying if you get bitten by a rabid animal and don't get the right shots afterwards. And so I was like, I might as well just get because it was worth it. And if I get bitten by a rabid animal, I won't die. Like, that's how vaccines were supposed to work.
Yeah.
And now it's like, no, you can get this, but you still might catch it.
Yeah.
And like that change, and that's where I was really like, whoa, wait a second. Like, what the fuck is going on with this whole COVID shit? And like, I had thought stuff before, like, you know, like I was in New York City during 9/11. It was like, what the fuck happened? But all those things in my life up to this point, like, there was just so much like disguising of the truth.
Yeah.
That made me be like, you know, we got to start chasing this thing.
Yeah, it was always things that just like added up that just like didn't quite sit right. Didn't make sense. You know, like, and once again, it goes back to the intuition. And it goes back to like, hey, listen, we're group people. And I think that a lot of people are good people. And they look at the best of humanity and like can't even fathom the evil that like would be required to do something like this. But, you know, I've done a lot of research on this. And once again, I've had a lot of conversations with people that they might not, you know, be so vocal about it because, you know, they care about their jobs and they can't speak out on these things. But in my position, it's like I have money. You know, it's like I have the willingness to actually go out and do it. And like, you know, someone's got to have some balls and be willing to do this, even if it's just in your own circle of influence. And, you know, I think that I'm not saying I have all the answers because, you know, quite frankly, I know that I don't. And I think the truth is often even crazier than I could have even imagined. But the ultimate red pill for me was 9/11.
Yeah. What facts and what points in that made you sort of really alter your vision of what exactly happened?
Yeah, so my ex, she was a compulsive liar. And it's, you know, it's one of those experiences, right? And I ended up and, you know, I was listening to Jocko Willink and, you know, in that breakup phase, like I had realized. And so it was just like, for me, it was just like, you know, how do I end up in this hole? And how do I get out of this hole? And how do I make sure that I don't end up in a hole again? And, you know, one of the things I came across was like, if there's an incentive to lie, you have to question someone's authenticity. You got to question the story. And, I've kind of taken that since then. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense, because if there's no incentive to lie, then like ultimately like they could, but what's the reason? That's one of other ways to kind of detect it. But, it's like you think about 9/11, right? You think about, I hear, well, why couldn't they just, if they rigged it with explosives, why couldn't they just let it, blow up the building? But visually, you think about the billions of people that saw those planes hit that tower, that strikes fear. And it ties into the story of just like their capabilities and the coordination. So you have the reason to, right? Talk about like the fact that the building itself, the buildings would have cost over $1 billion to remove, simply because of the asbestos that was in those buildings that they months before they had just lost back. I think it was back in May, before 9/11. They had lost their decade-long court case because when 9/11 or the World Trade Center buildings were first built, they were one of the last buildings to be made with asbestos in them. It was like right before like the ban on them. Like,
asbestos sucks.
Yeah, and so it was really intensive for them to actually remove it. They had to have these suits on, and they had to like contain the area, and like to get rid of it itself was expensive. So over $1 billion, like that's not nothing. And then you think about the fact that Larry Silverstein, like I remember seeing a video of him, and he literally says, and this goes to the level of like gaslighting that these people operate on. He talks like there's a clip of him on YouTube, and just the spin cycle that people put their minds to not see this. It's amazing to me. He's just like, we had such terrible loss of life, that I just made, and I told him I made the decision to pull it, and we stepped away and we watched the building come down. It's like he literally says this. And to put this into perspective, right? You had 2 planes and 3 buildings. If you went down to the World Trade Center building, there's one line that even mentions World 7. There's a whole diagram, like in person, doesn't show Building 7 on it. It's just like it never happened. Like this building that, keep in mind, it's over 40 stories, steel high-rise building. No building in history, I mean, steel buildings go back, over 100 years, right? No building in history before or since then has come down in that way, where it came down at free fall speed, according to the engineers NIST that investigated it, in that manner. So it's like, okay, so no jet fuel. You have a fire that happened. You have a guy that owns the building that made $4.5 billion on insurance money recouping from like those 3 buildings. The Building 7 itself was investigating Enron, was investigating other things. They had a bunch of the alphabet CIA like offices in there that were very important, come down at free fall speed in a manner that has never happened in history. I mean, that all alone is absurd. You think about the World Trade Center, the fact that you have like, you have this, it's like architects and engineers for truth. It's like an organization, right? They have thousands. Like, it's not like the earth is flat conspiracy, which like, it's all roped into the same thing, but that's not really fair because, this conspiracy, quote unquote, has thousands of architects, engineers, and scientists that have all come out and banded together and said, listen, like this has never happened. This did not happen the way that they're saying. There's people that have investigated it and found, evidence of explosives actually, in the foundation itself. And you think about the fact that you had this huge fire, right? So there's in a plane, you have 2 black boxes, one in the front, one in the back. So 4 total if you think about the 2 planes. They combed all the wreckage and for like fingertips, they were finding like little tiny pieces of fragments of bone. Yet they didn't find any of the black boxes from that day. You think about the fact that, you go back to the phone calls that they were making. So I think that initially they said like 30 or so like cell phone calls were made. And, if you listen to CC Lyle's voicemail, and it's like, not to get us lost here, but, the other day, last week, I was walking and there was a huge roof that collapsed, and like it was like right around the corner from me. And it was like right after I got done watching this documentary on YouTube called 9/11 or September 11th, The New Pearl Harbor. And so it's on YouTube, but it's 5 hours long, and it basically has these 50 questions of things that don't make sense. One of the things I talked about was CC Lyles. And if you listen to the voice recording, number one, she's a former police department person, right? There's no background noise in it, right? There's supposedly a hijacking that's actively happening. No background noise, no like airplane shoo, like the rumble in the background. You hear it in the middle if you listen close to the little whisper. She says she's on a plane 3 times. in a voicemail from a cell phone, I think. But she's on a plane. She says she's on a plane 3 times. You hear whispering, no background noise, and at the end, she leans in and says, "It's a frame." And so it's like the fact that she said that, right, was like, huh. You know, it was like, it's a frame. You could hear it clear as day. And then you factor in like the fact that they didn't find any of the black boxes, yet they were able to find a passport. They were able to find a passport on the ground. It's like, you know, that just so happened to link them to, you know, to like who was actually responsible for this. Think about the terrorists were 5'6". The first person that died, I believe, on flight 11, according to like, you know, the one woman's like recording or whatever, was happened to be an Israeli assassin. So like this guy is like trained, you know, he's like a professional hitman, if you will.
Yeah. Wait. The first guy to die on the plane.
I believe it's yeah.
He was an Israeli. Is this someone who was trying to stop the hijackers on the plane?
Well, he was the first one to supposedly die. So he was like the first person that got stabbed with these little box cutters that were like, you know, yay big. It's the story.
Those come out pretty. I mean, in London, the knife crime is insane. It's all getting hit with a Stanley.
Yeah, but it's still, they're not. Are they box cutters or are they like
the Stanley knife box cutters?
Yeah, box cutters. Okay, so they were able. These little guys were able to hijack all these planes, and they were able to do this, and they were able to take down this guy first and foremost. They were able to make cell phone calls, which has been debunked, that idea that it was even possible. And you look at the 9/11 Commission report. It's kind of it says the only line that even mentions cell phones is that calls were made from airphones and cell phones. That's it. The whole report. You think about the fact that when Bill Clinton, you know, got himself a nice pleasurable experience, they spent over $52 million investigating this. You think about the fact that, you know, prior to it, and not incriminating anybody, I don't know what the truth is. I'm just leading you there. You know, Netanyahu talked about how like the fact that their biggest threats were Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And so you look at what's going on now, you know, with Iran and the tensions and like their guy going down in a plane crash. You think about us creating ISIS in Syria, Iraq and Syria, right? Yeah. You think about the damage that we've done and just the millions of lives that were lost. I just think it's really, it's just really not right. And if you think about like from a motivational fact, you think about the fact that it was on fire for several months after. You think about the fact that their rushed nature to remove all this stuff. You think about the fact that when the first plane struck, George W. Bush was reading to a group of kids, I think it was like 28 or 29 minutes that he sat there. You think the Secret Service, like, how do they know? Where, you know, there was reports that there was like 8 planes in there. How do they know that they weren't going to, you know, change route and target him? You know, it's like the fact that he just sat there.
But, you know, going for, if George Bush, you know, we saw what the Iraq War was. We saw the war in the Middle East, how it's gone. The fact that no one was held accountable for what happened, for no weapons of mass destruction, for, you know, what exactly did happen, no one's really held anyone accountable. But yet we have a former president being held accountable for a counting misrepresentation to the highest degree of the law. That, you know, qualification and that like being like, hey, wait a second, we're applying heat here, but not when we had millions of Americans and millions of foreign Iraqi, Afghani die. That is where I get to like, wait a second, what exactly is happening? Like, why are we having justice being applied to this guy when we have like Obama was drone striking Syrian weddings? Like, many presidents have done worse things, as we talked about. Did George Bush do 9/11? Epstein had a picture of him with airplanes, you know, throwing them at blocks, like a painting, and he had Clinton in a dress. Like, did certain intelligence agencies know more than the American public? Maybe, probably, definitely. Do they have better insight into what exactly could have happened? Like, you know, there was definitely individuals in the Saudi royal family who were involved in 9/11. That is something that's come out recently. I don't think we'll ever be able to figure out what exactly happened. And maybe, like, hypothetically with the, you know, the moving.
In the case is that not like, will we never know what happened? I think we could easily look at it if you got 10 working brain cells and for me I got like 11. You know, it's like if you look at it and just factor in that, you know, thousands of architects, engineers, and, you know, scientists have all come together and have voiced opinion that this didn't happen, that if Building 7 came down in that way on any other day, it would have been history. I mean, like, you know, the story itself is that one little corner column from at the top. had collapsed, and that was what triggered everything. But if you look at it, everything comes down at the same time. If the building was to come down in that way, something would have prevented it. Imagine Lego blocks stacked on top of each other. If you got rid of one, maybe like the force of the other Lego blocks would have come down and crushed it, but not in that even of a way. And I think that ultimately what it comes down to is not so much figuring out exactly what happened on that day, but just really looking at the evidence from like the counterpoints. Like I said, the two best videos in my opinion, 9/11, The Great Deception, while it's still on YouTube, and September 11th, the New Pearl Harbor, because there's a playbook and you look at what happened. So you got to remember after this, what is the reasoning, right? Mm-hmm. And so they talk about how like, different agencies had different intelligence. They didn't communicate. So it's, we need to increase the security. So the Patriot Act, which was drafted the year prior, all of a sudden they have there's a playbook. If you want to centralize power, how do you do it? Well, problem, reaction, solution. And so the solution is just a means to centralize that power, to give them more tools, more access to things, more consolidation of your rights, because safety is the justification. But ask yourself this: if the means is really safety, then have they really done a great job of preventing those things? Like, it's hard to know what acts of violence and terrorism were prevented. But more importantly, does it really benefit their mission if their mission is to centralize power? Because, when you talk about guns, right, how does it benefit them for people to be armed? It doesn't. And so you talk about, like if someone's going to go shoot up a school, there's no reason to intervene, because, if you have this media machine that's available and can, like channel all that light and people's energy and attention onto this incident, people get riled up. And so, problem, reaction, solution. You have a problem, gun violence, schools getting shut up. Then you have a reaction of all the public and amplified by the media. Then it's a solution. And the solution is to take away guns. That helps them. So it doesn't hurt.
Do you think it's a foreign entity sort of radicalizing lone wolf shooters to try to take away Americans' rights for guns because they know that that's the strongest? Like, imagine trying to invade the mainland United States. The Japanese.
Nobody's gonna invade us. I think that Americans need an enemy to fight against. I think that it's big business. You talk about the war in Ukraine, the fact that parts of Russian missiles, which there's back channels, and some of these parts are more common. I think it's like 70 or 80 parts, and some of Russia's missiles are made exclusively in the United States. So now you have this situation where senators, congressmen, our president, anybody in those positions can legally inside trade, meaning that they gatekeep whether or not we go to war, who we go to war with, how much money we spend, who actually gets that money, and are legally allowed to invest in certain companies. So these companies that they invest in now are then making parts for both sides of the war. And then so now you have Russia, they drop in bombs and blowing up all these Ukrainians, unfortunately for them, right? It's like blowing up hospitals, bridges, roads, critical infrastructure that needs to get rebuilt. They just signed a $400 billion, BlackRock just signed a $400 billion deal as part of already hundreds of billions of dollars that are pledged to rebuild these areas. And so it's like this playbook that gets played over again and over again. And my question is this: how many people have to die before people actually say something and speak up? It's like, that's why it's like names and all this stuff doesn't really matter to me, because at the end of the day, it's fucked up.
In the warfare, we're seeing the next generation of just like warfare the human mind can't even comprehend. Like, have you seen some of this footage of drones flying
through the woods and stuff?
Yeah, flying right next to Russians' heads
and blowing up,
and the Russians like, oh fuck. Like, imagine drones move in ways we always thought that World War III or the next generation of war.
I think we already lost World War III.
You do?
I think that it happened. We just been asleep. I think that we're about to start World War IV, and that's why you see all the tanks going.
What do you think World War III was?
I think World War III was going back to the foundation of America, right? A lot of people think it was they call it the War of Independence from Britain. But if you look at, there's a quote from Benjamin Franklin, you could pull it up. Whenever the actual podcast, but it was actually fought over what's the Currency Act. So basically, the Bank of England was giving us all this money and forced us to do business via these paper notes, which they were making huge money off of the interest on all of those.
Right.
And so, the idea that, it's 2% tax or whatever, taxation with representation, that wasn't what it was. It was the interest that they were making. And so there's a quote by Benjamin Franklin. You have to look it up to see exactly what it says. Quote by Benjamin Franklin on the primary cause of the revolution. And you got to keep in mind that Ben Franklin was, he was in France. He was the one that was largely responsible.
Banging hookers.
Well, he was largely responsible for getting France to, come help us. And, I think when you talk about this stuff, this is where you lose people. But it doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means that it's not talked about, because why would our history books talk about this? The role of secret societies till this day, going back hundreds of years, have played a big role in a lot of this stuff. And so you talk about the Revolutionary War, about the real causes of it. You talk about the fact that Britain wasn't happy about this, so they came over, and that's War of 1812. They were pissed.
Right.
They wanted their colony back, and so they said, "Listen, either we're going to take this colony back by force, or we're going to bankrupt them." And that's what they did. And so that's why they were burning all this stuff, lighting it all on fire. And then you go to 1832, I believe, was Andrew Jackson. Mm-hmm. And Andrew, his like slogan or quote was, "Andrew No Bank Jackson."
Yeah.
And so what they tried to do to him, they tried to kill him. 2 pistols, and went and tried to assassinate him, and both pistols didn't work. And so then I think he beat him with his cane or something.
Yeah.
And then you talk about Abe Lincoln. It's like the causes for the Civil War itself, like these infiltrators that were in correspondence with people in Britain. That's why Britain was sending money, and Europe, the monarchy over there, was helping, fund the South and assist them in this process. Abe Lincoln wanted to put us on a system called greenbacks, which would have got us away from that banking system. And so what they did was, the Bank of England said, "Hey, listen, we'll loan you money at 30% interest rate." And a quote from him was like, "I don't want to free the black man by enslaving the white man." And so he didn't do it. So they win the war. And funny enough, John Wilkes Booth, who probably had his own reasons, supposedly, because it was like he had got his heart broke.
So why would they want him dead?
Because he was trying to get them on the greenbacks, which would have taken them off of this system that required that basically they were making all the money from interest from this process. And so you think, so that leads you to the Federal Reserve. And so JP Morgan was supposed to be on the Titanic. Mm-hmm. And you could look this up. This is a fact. I mean, 6 or 7, I think the number, I've seen both. They got 6 or 7 warnings to slow down. And so, warnings that there's icebergs ahead and all this sort of thing. And the richest man in the world at the time was on that boat.
Yeah.
And so there's some very powerful people that were against the Federal Reserve. And, we know what happened to them.
You think it was a landmine? Yeah, you think it was a water mine?
I don't think it's a water mine. I don't know. I've seen it was actually an icebreaker boat that just ran into the side that actually crashed it. I've seen that the fact that they knew there was icebergs, they just went ahead and did it anyways. This was just all part of the plan. I don't really know. I think that in isolation, you can kind of this is what people do, right? Mm-hmm. They'll see that and they'll say that didn't happen. That's a lie. You're crazy. This or that. So they just miss that point. It's not the point itself. It's like I said, if you understand the outcome, you understand the destination, you can understand the journey. And whether or not that's true, it doesn't matter. All I know is that right after that, the Federal Reserve got created. And if you look at who's on the $100 bill, Ben Franklin. Right. You look at who's on the $20 bill, Andrew Jackson. You look at who's on the penny, Abraham Lincoln. And so it's like they're making fun of these people. They're just they out in the open. They're these people that were against that banking system. It's crazy, man. It's really deep. It's diabolical. It's been a patient process that has gone on for hundreds of years. And if you look at our system now, I mean, we're all slaves. It's just the truth.
But what about India, right? Because one of the reasons why the British were backing, they could have backed the South way more in the Civil War. It's just because India came along and their cotton production was way more than the South could sell them. And plus they still owned that colony. So there is that element to where Britain's allegiances lied in the Civil War, because they could have helped the South way more, but they didn't.
They helped them a lot. I'm pretty sure they send a steel ship over or something.
Yeah.
Or help fund the creation of it. I think that
the Monitor, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And then the North had to make their own. It's crazy.
That was a wild fight.
Yeah.
I mean, when they that's crazy evolution.
That's one of the craziest battles for sure.
Yeah, it was the Monitor and not the Alligator, but the USS. I gotta find out the name of the Union one. But isn't that the plot of Sahara? With
I've never seen it.
Matthew McConaughey, basically the ironclad warship, the USS Monitor, and then the USS Merrimack. But anyway, it ends up in the Sahara because they basically were like, historical fiction, like the Sahara during the Civil War was a swamp. So that's pretty wild.
Yeah,
But
it's pretty wild, and it's like, once again, you just kind of go along this sort of script, right? You know, like follow the timeline like out. It just gets worse and worse, and now we're in a situation where people are so disenfranchised. I mean, you know, like, I think that this is another point that people will have a lot of contention on, and I'm happy to I'm happy to debate this with anybody, because I my personal belief is that it's true. I think that the disenfranchisement of people, if you will, like separating group identities, ultimately it doesn't really it serves the people that overrule us. It doesn't serve the individuals, because it's like, white people are great, and there's nothing that says that other people aren't great too. We're all great. Our skin color is just skin deep.
The identity politics has basically been weaponized to try to win certain demographics in politics. I mean, seeing the political machine up close has been pretty, when I was running, like, seeing how they dealt with things, see how they micro-targeted different villages, different townships, different specific ethnic groups in each township just to get them to vote a certain way, was fascinating. Something that I never, I never thought it was that black and white how they did it, and it just plays into identity politics. And the reason why they play those up is because the more you can separate people, the more you can win, like, divide and conquer.
Yeah, divide and conquer. Yeah. Exactly. That's why it's like the whole myth of, like, getting us our own home. It's like, you separate people naturally, and then you sell this myth that, of like, you got to get a house. Well, how do you get a house? You need a mortgage. Well, who owns the people that, who owns the banks that ultimately own the mortgage? And so what happens if you speak out against this, right? Or you say things that aren't favorable to the system? Well, they punish you economically. They fire you from your job. They we're tribal creatures. We're community creatures.
So you think the single family home, there should be multi-family homes of, like, entire families?
I just think everything has a history to it, right? Go back to the universe itself. I mean, I think that, the education system is structured in a certain way. I believe that it was made to,
Didn't sneeze.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
When you're about to sneeze.
I was like, I'm about to ruin this recording. Don't sneeze into the mic.
Yeah, it's all good. I think that everything has a history to it. I think that it ultimately benefits them to disenfranchise people, to make people feel like they're weak and powerless, and they're incapacitated. I think that once again, it goes back to the centralization of power. This has been happening over hundreds of years, and I think that if you think about any number of historical events, that regardless how true they are, that even saying things that are against it, that are against the official narrative, you get roasted for it, and it's absolute bullshit. I think that it's not about hating any group of people. It's about the truth, and it's about ultimately having a positive view towards humanity and the things that we've done, and just like our future as a whole.
Do you think there might be now, like, Steelman argument, like, that there is an entire system and it's just something that has evolved because it's efficient and it works? It's sort of not like the system that we talk about, this financial system, how wages work, how the entire economy works, that it evolved from basically trial and error, and it wasn't divine construction from the start, like a machine that was designed to work a certain way, but just something that fell into place because it worked. I mean, like, if you read back to Adam Smith, you read back to the foundations of capitalism, like, that the system that they describe is very basic, but it just fell into place in a certain way. Like, wages, taxes, rent were something that sort of emerged organically. So, like, for example, they say that original social, like, when people talk about collectivist groups in early humanity, they say that, that's sort of like what communists aim for. Like, oh, everyone brings something to the table and they share what they have amongst everybody, and they operate for the best of the group because we're all humanity and we all love each other. But there is the idea that, debt existed in those circumstances. It just wasn't monetary debt. It was social debt. So, for example, you were a son who provided for his family as a whole because you had a debt to your father who provided for you when you were young and sick, not sick, but just young and useless to certain things. But you did chores around the house. You had a debt to your mother because your mother was your mother, and you owed her so much from raising you from a small newborn and keeping you safe. There was debt to that. You had debt to your neighbor because that debt was essentially they're not coming over and murdering you and taking everything you have. So you have a debt because they weren't being violent towards you. They were amicable. So there was a debt in that. And the fact that now that we're in a larger society, we have to quantify that debt because it isn't as implied. So, that sort of plays into how this system arose as opposed to it being some well-designed, thought out, we're going to make sure people have to work for a wage because it will ensure they won't ever get ahead? Or is it just symptoms of something that fell into place? There is that element.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think that there's a whole number of things that have played into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to understand that these secret societies, in terms of how they actually view like the idea of like rule by the people. I mean, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. It's a rule by select few over a number of people. And if you look at, and it's like before the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor a reserve, it's a separate entity. It's like before that, I mean, we got our money from tariffs. And I'm not like as well versed in like economic theory per se. I think that would be an answer best suited for somebody else. I do understand that there was other ways to make money besides what we had. And you think about the wars, like I said, it's big business. And you think about who's dying in these wars. You think about who's died in these wars. You think about the profit that is being reaped in by these individuals. I mean, it's really a greed thing.
Right.
I think that that's what it really comes down to.
But like you're talking about, since ancient Babylon, since ancient, but like if anyone were to have such a domination over basically the span of humanity, like the Patriots fell, like the Roman Empire fell, there would be no way for someone to have such a stronghold for such a long time.
Why not?
Because it's super like everything must end. There's no way to maintain like. So, for example, like, people talk the Illuminati, people talk about all sorts of groups that are behind the scenes, people talk about the Bohemian Grove, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Bohemian Grove throughout, has been like old white dudes doing weird shit in the woods and all sorts of stuff. That has now disappeared. Like you can see YouTubers run up in it, and it's a hollow owl.
It's that location has disappeared. But once again, this goes back. Look at that. But if you look at society, I mean, it's like we're in a zoo, and we have this cage around us. It's like if I wanted to go live off the land and do something different with my friends, how would I do it? Where would I go? You can't. It's like if I had owned land, I still have to pay rent to the government.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they still own us, and that's why it's like it's not about like. It's not about any one group of people necessarily being bad. It's just understanding what are their incentives, how do they actually look at people, and then if you look at the sphere of influence, that certain people have in these secret societies, if you will, that spans from banking to media to the military-industrial complex to the pharmaceutical industrial complex. You look at all these things. At the end of the day, what it comes back to is the poisoning of us, getting us fat, getting us sick, getting us weak, just farming as much money and siphoning as much energy as they can from us. And I think we've gone down the rabbit hole pretty far. But like I said, I think at the end of the day, you look at any of these events, right? Happened. You talk about 9/11, you talk about Pearl Harbor, you talk about a lot of these incidents. There's this playbook, even October 7th. You're like, you talk about the Patriot Act, right? We talked about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it doesn't incentivize them to actually do something in a lot of cases, because at the end of the day, it actually helps their cause. If Boston bombing, for example, if they have that intel, right, that knowledge, either they intervene or they don't. And if they don't intervene, then all of a sudden this Islamic group had done something like this terrorist attack. This terrorist attack can now be used as, to rile people up. You got a reaction, and then the solution is, well, we have to wage war against this. And I think power is in the people, man. I think that the truth is the truth is the truth. I encourage people to go and look honestly at a lot of these things. I think that I've read a lot speaking about this, and you don't have to take my word for it. I think you can, use your own good faith judgment, just looking at a lot of these things with the perhaps. And, it's like, I think that, soon it will be too late, if not already.
Dude, I mean, this is pretty mind-blowing stuff, and I've looked into it, but I try to see both sides of it, because, like, if there is this group of, World Economic Forum making WHO, who are basically controlling everything from behind the scenes, who try to ensure that, control of the population, populism never becomes a thing, because populism means that they're not making the decisions. It means that democracy is actually taking place. Isn't it almost scarier to think that there might actually be no one behind the curtain, that life is just lifing and these things are happening, and tragedy is these tragedies are just the truth and not coincidence, and shit happens? Which you think's a scarier reality? I
think the scary reality is that it's orchestrated, for sure, in my opinion, because selfishly for me, I think that that doesn't necessarily bode well. It doesn't bode well for the other people that have said this sort of thing. But I'm not scared. I think that at the end of the day, as a Christian, I believe that when that time comes, it comes, and it is what it is. Like I said, if you can kill me, but at the end of the day, the forces grow stronger. And I think that we as a human, as a person that studied human history, I think that we owe it to ourselves to create the world as a collective conscious. But you don't do it from a lower vibrational state. You don't do it from a place of hatred and a place of fear. And at the end of the day, that's what they want. They don't want us like humming our vibration. And
are you a believer in that vibrations have a certain power that, like, for example, like built the pyramids? Like there is this idea that ancient chanters would move blocks and construct them by using certain vibrations.
Yeah, I think that if, Nikola Tesla had a quote, once we start looking at things from energy, frequency, and vibration, we'll learn more about science in a decade than we have in all of history. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I'm Serbian, he's Serbian. I mean, I'm a little biased. But
you know who investigated his apartment after he died?
Who?
Donald Trump's uncle.
Wow.
And there's a crazy book called The Adventures of Baron Trump from the 1830s. And
I was in a Clash of Clans clan with Baron Trump at one point.
You were?
Yeah, I got a picture with Donald. They wrote an article in the Boston Globe, I think, or maybe not the Boston Globe.
You were in a Clash of Clans?
I was, yeah. I worked at a golf course internship on his golf course.
Where?
Not Baron's, Donald's.
Oh, yeah.
In New Jersey.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's been.
Was this in high school?
No, this is in college.
Oh, word.
Yeah, I got a picture with the Don, and I just think that they knew what they're doing. By it just stinks because honestly, like, even speaking about this stuff, it's probably futile. It's probably like I said, it's probably not a fruitful endeavor for myself. But there's things more important than just ourselves and just the collective human consciousness. And I think that at the end of the day that. They knew what they're doing. Either they knew what they're doing or they're not. You look at Biden, I shared this video the other day, and it was a leader of the free world with a American flag and a laughing emoji. And just see all the people that attacked me instead of just looking at him. And if you look at the video, he's touching all these little girls in this weird way,
Dude.
Holding them and grabbing them and rubbing their hair and a whole montage of it. And it's you think about the fact that most people would say this guy is senile. He's literally it's just this reality that we live in, that we're being gaslit to think that they actually think that this is their man for the job. They don't. They're funneling us to this other guy. And so you have this problem. Donald Trump, he gets arrested, right? And this, look back at this clip 5 years from now, I guarantee it's true. Mark my words, watch it, book it down. You have this arrest that happens, right?
Right.
So you rile up all this support. You get these two sides that are pitted against each other, rather than working on the same team. And so it's he's I'm going to dismantle the deep state and do all this stuff. But then it's just you look at who's actually making up his team and these things.
Yeah.
It's it's all a lie. We're being gaslit just like we were then. They're going to use this as a solution to bring back the solution, create this police state to get rid of all these people and do all this sort of thing. And with that power, with that centralization, that is going to spell the next chapter, which is not going to be good. And at that point in time, these clips probably won't even be in existence because they won't want you to know that.
Do you think that they actually put him in prison, no police escort, no Secret Service, and he ends up getting shanked?
He's not going to die. He's part of. That's what I'm saying to you is that either it happens by accident or it's not, and it didn't happen by accident. They knew that him getting arrested or convicted of all these all these felonies, right? There's been so many other presidents that have done way worse things. I mean, Bill Clinton has publicly paid people off. Think about Epstein's list. We'll never see that. And
he was definitely intelligence. That was a blackmail operation to make sure that certain, people wouldn't voice concerns about, definitely some actions overseas. Like, that is definitely on there. And you can look at Ghislaine Maxwell's father, who was doing the exact same shit. And we had a guest earlier who's talking about there was a guy in the 1960s who was doing the exact same honeypot scheme in Syria, in Egypt. That's pretty on level. I don't think anyone, that's starting to become basically a lot of these people are blackmailed to make sure that certain things.
Well, that's why they get promoted. I mean, you've gone through this yourself, trying to go through the ranks and trying to actually run for office. The people that get promoted, go back to playbook, right? Because that's just that framework is applied to a lot of these things. That's why I said this isn't an accident. A lot of these things that have happened, it's intentional. They're smart. They're very smart. They understand the universe in ways that you and I surely don't, to a certain level. And first they're gonna bribe you. Right, they're going to pay you, to go along with it, and even if it's against your own constituents or your people, etc. Then they're going to blackmail you. So it's if they don't have, think about it. If you're in a group of people that's doing something nefarious, I'm not going to mention kids and weird stuff like that, which is, that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. That might be the line that we ends well. But you think about that, right? You think about that sort of thing. If you're doing it right, and you have somebody that's not, then they could snitch on you. So by forcing them into those sort of acts, you have this group kind of collective protection that exists. And so if that doesn't work, then it goes to violence, whether that's, physically, mentally, emotionally, whether it's using their bots to attack you on Twitter. It's whether it's just threatening it, whether it's actually, following through with that violence. And that's just kind of how we got to where we're at today. And it's really sad. And I think that, at the end of the day, if people don't wake up and realize that reality, however scary it may be.
How would we make change?
Well, like anything else, it starts from, there's an esoteric philosophy, right? As above, so below. As within, so without. So it's as it happens in our own relationship with work, in our households, with our people that are close to us, it happens on a larger scale from the government and, how it interacts with the people that it's looking after. As as within, so without. So it's it starts with change on the inside, and it starts with taking this damn governor off us and getting us away from plastic bottles, which is bad for the environment. It's bad for us with microplastics in our balls, and it's ultimately prevents us from seeing through that veil. So this message is probably think about it from an odds perspective, 25%. If you're in the casino and you're betting on 25%, that's not good odds, but some people will see it, and some people realize it, and just kind of following this train through and thinking about a lot of these things, I think is important. So the point is that it starts from within, and it starts with really pouring into ourselves. The problem is that we're in a tough spot, because if you don't go to work, what happens? You can't eat. And so it's every level in yoga, and this is where I'll lose people, but it's.
Now, what is this yoga? You mentioned it once before.
Yoga. So yogis are people that study it, right?
You're using a J in there. It's yoga.
Oh, yoga. I didn't mean to do that.
I was like, what is this? Okay, so have you been doing a lot of yoga? I know you did ballet early.
Yeah, I've done a lot of yoga, but it's not necessarily, there's different elements to yoga, just like there's different levels to our existence, right? It's you have your physical body. That's one body in yoga. You have your mental body. For example, if you saw an incident that happened, right? You had this minivan that was driving across the street and had a bunch of kids, babies, and kittens inside, and it just drove into a telephone pole and the whole thing blew up. Every time you saw a silver minivan, the same one as that, your eyes see this minivan, it triggers these thoughts that vault forward, You know, it's a traumatic experience. Like, holy crap, you know, like your whole body is a whole body reaction. Your brain is kind of like a dumpster. And so it's like everything you see, smell, taste, hear, etc., all that stuff gets stored into this garbage pile. If we're identified with our thoughts and think that's who we are, when these things come up, that's obviously who we are. We're limited to that. But as a human being, like they talk about in yogi culture, we just happen to have thoughts that pop up. They're like, we're independent of those. But our whole education system, in terms of like memorizing information, regurgitating it on a test, is something that is intentional. That is you know, orchestrated. For whatever means. It could have just been like, you know, fluoride, it was good for your teeth, but it also happens to serve this. It certainly doesn't behoove them to try to implement change despite the things that they say. And so if you look at every single level, right, and so in yogi, they view us as energetic beings. If I were to pinch your hand or your leg or whatever it may be, there's a signal that's sent to your brain. That's an electrical signal. We know that electricity that comes to your house or my house or this office, Barstool here, that it doesn't travel like a water through a tube. It travels around outside. That's how electricity travels. And so you think about energy that goes through the body. You have different energy centers. Those are the 7 main chakras that they talk about. You've heard chakras. And so if you think about it, goes from root chakra to sacral chakra to solar plexus to heart to throat to third eye to crown. And so it's like ultimately getting our body in alignment to channel the energy from the ground all the way through our skull, through the top of our head, is enlightenment. That's like the ultimate goal. But what they've done is that if you look at our root chakra, so it's like our ability to provide food and survival and those sort of needs, they've waged economic war. So not only we're in debt to these, you know, to pay our mortgage off, we have to go to work, so we're distracted, we can't really think about it. It's like then you think about them, all the number of immigrants, you know, it's like that are coming to the country. It's illegally, right? You know, like it creates a strain economically on your ability to provide those resources. So it's under stress, it's blocked. Then you go up to the sacral chakra, you think about porn. You know, it's just like how toxic it is for humans. You think about the mental identification is with it, the obsession with genitalia, and it's like all those sorts of things. It's like even just like the idea that sex is just for like hookups, you know, versus like being like an act of like that's something that's holy. You're creating life. Go ahead.
There's a little juxtaposition here. NDAs, making it easier for NDAs, hookup culture is bad. How do you balance those?
Yeah, so I think that at the end of the day, we live in a free society, and I think people have to go where they're at. So if my thing is that I'm not casting moral judgment on anybody. This isn't necessarily a moral thing, like it's good or bad. Right. I think that, you know, people can use NDAs for hookups, but NDAs can be used for any number of things. Like even having this conversation between people that don't want to lose their jobs is something that can be protected via an NDA. It's like, hey, listen, let's just keep what happens between us. You think about the invasion of privacy that like somebody, you know, name a celebrity, whatever, Oprah. You know, it's like when people come to her house and like, you know, they're doing work around her house, watching her kids, cooking food. They're overhearing conversations. They don't want people to hear about what is being talked about.
But getting back to the energy, because that's a fascinating conversation. Yeah. You think, so how do you live your life in order to make sure that these energy flows aren't corrupted?
Yeah, I think that first off, I've had my own experiences going. You know, football has provided me, you know, economic opportunity to actually like take a step away and kind of look at these things. I think that you know, I distill all my water, which is a whole process, but just getting it to the point where it's, you know, pure water is something that, you know, 3/4 of Americans don't do. A lot of, I bet it would be even a smaller percentage that don't drink their water from plastic primarily, that are avoiding that. You know, I think that I'm not watching porn. That's a huge one. Getting away from that and kind of programming it to be like an act of love and like that sort of thing. I think that, you know, we're in a tough position with our root chakra, like being able to avoid the economic pressures of that sort of thing and like that strain of like we have to go work. You have to play in the system, and that's what I'm saying. We're slaves, and then it goes up to soul, as Martin Luther King said, judge somebody by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. That is the dream, right? And you know, it's like disenfranchising people, removing their power, their ability to actually do something. It blocks that chakra. That's what I'm trying to say, and all that fear that gets constructed blocks our heart chakra. It closes off our heart. It makes us live in this state of fear, and then it makes us susceptible to vote for someone like Donald Trump based off his rhetoric, which then allows him to take action, and it gets the other side riled up, creates this war, which then can create this opportunity to take away more of our rights. You think about our third chakra. Our third chakra, these energetic centers are linked to other centers in our body, and our sacral chakra and our third chakra are linked together. I know that anecdotally. I've studied that. And then we already talked about our third eye, and all this, you got a complete decimation of our third eye, our throat, our heart, our solar plexus, our sacral, and our root chakra. And so it's like people are so disenfranchised, so weak and powerless. That's why if you look at the symptoms of like 60% chronic illness, the amount of diabetes, over 50% of the world is obese. You look at the fact that people have to resort to insults rather than like actual intellectual conversation. And all that fear, I think, just plays right into their hands, and it just sucks. And I think that in the history of the world, we've never had a greater opposition or never greater opponent than we do right now, and the odds have never been worse for us. But if there's a will, there's a way, and the human spirit and goodness shall prevail.
Where do you see humanity progressing in the next 20 to 100 years, 10 to 100?
Where does it play out?
Where does it play out? Do we make it to the stars? Do we have a giant conflict on Earth?
Yeah, I think that there's different forces at that level. I think that you have people like Elon Musk, where there's conflicting opinions about like, what is his underlying opinion about like things. Then you have people like Bill Gates, who has talked about like, hey, population is a problem. We have to implement things that are population control.
So Bill Gates, is he part of like, I agree that there is a large, like, I think the best way to define this group that you're talking about is anti-humanists. Like people who don't believe that humanity can reach for the stars, that don't believe that we can keep increasing in size, that we need to downsize, we need to, lower birth rates, we need to lower consumption. We're not finding solutions to help accommodate the more people. Like, this almost idea that we have a growing family, let's stop growing as a family, let's shrink our family.
It's a lie. That
that's
premise is a lie.
That's
I think that once again it goes back to different strokes for different folks, and I think that some people are anti-humanist and they want to see us converted to some sort of like some sort of different system. I don't know exactly what like quote unquote secret societies, and it sounds woo woo, but go back and look at the history of like the world. It's not that these people get together and practice certain philosophies and religious principles. But then you look at other groups who talk about like, hey, our group is superior than every other group. And, it's like, if that's true, and if what they're saying is true about like other people are just cattle, they're just animals or beasts, then at the end
I could see Bill Gates. what Bill Gates has done in Africa, like I was in Uganda and there was signs like "fuck Bill Gates." Yeah. Like Bill Gates shot up the Gates Foundation has done some terrible shit in Africa, and they know that they're being experimented on, and they know that like when your village doesn't have problem with fertility for thousands of years, and then one day after random doctors come in and shoot you up with random stuff, that your infant mortality rate goes through the roof, and your birth rate like goes to zero almost, because after these random people came and shot you up with stuff. The thing is like they can't get away with it in first world countries, but they do it all across that continent, and it is ridiculous. Like they've woken up. Like the Bill Gates Foundation, which was supposed to be helping the continent, and like even in Uganda, they're like, we hate Bill Gates. We know that he's just shooting us up with poison.
Well, he's doing this. He's doing the same thing here, and the deeper you go, the more messed up it gets. And I think that like look at, once again, to lower our vibration, how do you do it? Well, food is a big part of who we are. You eat this food, it's like a car, it's our fuel. And so it's like, if you could feed us insects, it's obviously worse for us than if you ate meat and beef and chicken. So it's like, at first it was this whole thing about global warming, the cow farts. It's such a joke. It's like the cow farts were heating up the planet, so we got to kill them. Then it was like that didn't really work, because like farmers in France and different European countries were taking their trucks and protesting.
Yeah.
And so now if you look at what they're doing, like they have this bird flu that I
Yeah.
keep seeing pop up. And so using that as a justification, they just killed millions of
Oh,
chickens. You know, in Australia.
Bird flu is pretty fucking dangerous, though.
Well, they just killed millions of
Yeah.
chickens in Australia. They're saying it's actually attacking, it's spreading through the cows,
Yeah.
converting to humans. It's like now in Illinois there just was a fire. I think it was like 1.2 million chickens or something. You could
Yeah.
exact number. It's like,
Well, that's why those women were gluing themselves to the Timberwolves floor, because the owner of the Timberwolves owned all these bird processing plants and hatcheries, and he had to kill a lot of the chickens because they were getting bird flu. Bird flu, like, they may use it as a ploy to control the population and try, like, cause another pandemic, but bird flu, when it spreads through, like, it kills everything, and and it's extremely transmissible because birds, the way birds live, right? They fly through the air. They are they're much more cleanly than other animals, and because they're in open air environments, in order for a flu to pass between them, it needs to be a really contagious flu. So, like, that there is, like, credence to how bad
yeah, there's always credence, and there's always people that at the end of the day they're going to take the cheese and they're going to think these things and all that sort of thing. But if you follow that train of thought down, right, and it's so bad you need to justify it, right?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't dismiss the fact that, like, they could have played a role in orchestrating that thing to begin with in the first place.
Right.
Like their understanding of viruses and, like, like that they understand that. They're smart people. They understand, okay, we have a problem, we need a reaction, and we create a solution. The solution at the end of the day, you follow that train of thought down. It's like, you got to get rid of the chickens, you need to get rid of the cows because they're spreading this super viral, contagion. That doesn't bode well for people. Like us eating insects, us eating these, like, meat alternatives that aren't actually meat, they're just grown in a lab, poisons us, it weakens us, it disenfranchises us, it saps our energy, and it lowers our vibration. And mind you, that you look at Mark Zuckerberg, he's growing his own cattle, like wine.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, he's growing his own cattle in Hawaii. Exactly.
I mean, if, like, Hawaii is the perfect place for an apocalypse.
It is. I mean, look at the fact that I know you got in trouble for this, right? So maybe I shouldn't talk about that.
What, the Maui fires?
Yeah.
I mean, were they clearing the land so that they could make sure there isn't a population where if they have to escape to their doomsday bunker, like that, the coincidences of how the Maui fires didn't get dealt with right away, and how resources weren't allocated and the water was shut off to the fire, like, is very suspicious, and violates several, like, reactions to, like, they plan out what to do in wildfire situations. They did almost everything wrong, and they did almost, like,
just like 9/11, just like the flight attendants, they didn't follow any of the protocols. One person called reception. Like, why does somebody call the reception number? They don't do that in an emergency.
Well, I mean, panic, but they are training.
She was on the phone for 25 minutes. She said that Susie Ong, I think her name was, she talked about how she was on the phone for 25 minutes.
Jeez.
We'll never get the full 25-minute recording. She's not in a state of panic. Everyone's like, oh, wow, she's so calm. No, she's in a hangar, and that's why you don't hear any background noise. She's like, there's pepper spray. Then, she's like, I think there's a hijacking. It's just like, it's, once again, it's when you look at it, these in singularity incidents, it's just like, okay, your brain can kind of rationalize it, but when you look at it across the board, there's a theme, there's a playbook that happens, for different circumstances. You look at that incident, they still don't know what the reason of that Vegas shooter was. They have no idea the motive. His house happened to burn down. If you look at a lot of some of the other clips, there's videos of, like, helicopters in the sky. There's like the actual sound effects, like,
yeah, the Vegas shooting thing, and the sheriff is the same sheriff as the Maui fires.
And that's the biggest thing, is that they happen to have the same sheriff. So it's like, to the mental, like, bending to say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. That's what they want us to think. And unfortunately, that's why I think we're cooked, is that people, they to come to the realization that these entities that were put in place to look after our best interest betrayed us. And they've betrayed us in every way. They've killed us. They've lied to us. They've pitted us against each other. And to look at that and to come to grips with that, ultimately, at the end of the day, is psychologically very painful. There's a psychology term called systematic betrayal, and for people to come to grips with that is like, whoa, it's hard. And so it's like any one of the things I talked about in alone could be alarming. But when you look at it across the board and you look at the the precarious nature we're in now, in like terms of like feeling helpless, like, oh, we're gonna vote for Trump. It's like, a lot of the things that he's like, oh, I might pardon Julian Assange. It's like, he could have pardoned him last time. He's already been in office. Like, we've seen how that has gone. And
do you think he's a pawn of the system?
He wouldn't have got to his position if he wasn't. I mean, it's a sad reality, but it's like our country at the end of the day has been hijacked by forces that are so nefarious, and it's just we're.
What do we do?
What do we do? I think once again I think that we open our eyes first and foremost. We stop drinking tap water to allow our mind a little bit of break. I think that you look at things like I talked about, the biggest ones being 9/11. That's a red pill for a lot of people, because it's like the evidence is so overwhelming that, in my opinion, anybody that actually looks at the counterpoints, that's for all these things, like any number of things to happen on any other normal day would have been a statistical anomaly, like never before done in history. But for them all to happen for that way, with such a obvious incentive, on the other side of it, it's like, what do we do? Once again, awareness, first step. People need to understand that how these things work. Like, it's like the reasoning behind it. We need to all accept it. Be like, shit, like at the very least, we'll be in this together. And then finally, from there, I think that the good Lord and, the universal power, if you will, whether you believe in God or like that universal source, will tell us exactly what we need to do.
But do you think that it is a concerted, like, small group of people, or is just people motivated by there is this element that sociopaths rise to the top because they have no empathy, they don't view other people as people, and those individuals rise to the top under the motivation of profit maximization, capitalism, greed puts them at the top, and then they all operate in this non-empathetical way to the rest of the population. And those individuals just come from all walks of life, but they all rise to the top. Bill Gates. Oprah seemed personable, but she had a big part in the, if we were to make a cast of characters, like Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Anthony Fauci, we'll throw him in there. But these are all people who go to the top because they're
not at the top though. That's what it's like. You look at it like a pyramid, right? As above, so above, so below. It's like you look at it as like a microcosm. Like visually, I think it's more easy to understand. Imagine if we were on a plantation, right? And you had a system, or even a zoo, and you had zookeepers, right? So you have this, imagine the bottom of the pyramid. 99% of people are in that bottom of the pyramid, right? You have barbed wire around it. You can't really escape. You can't go set up a farmland somewhere. You're stuck in that spot. And so, you and your other people that are in the zoo and on this plantation, whatever word you want to use, it's like you have people that are at the top that at the end of the day have their own incentives, whether it's, to destroy humanity, whether it's, to create a space for their people to inhabit the earth. Whatever the incentive is, does not bode well for the people that are in the 99%. Like we're serving them at the end of the day. That's what we do now, and that's what we do then. And so if you look at the fact that the means of control in terms of what our eyes are set on, well, we have this illusion that we could vote people into power. But if you look at there's certain issues and certain things that there's not really any choice. Once again, it's like how these things work, like who's actually in charge and pulling the strings. Sometimes interests converge. At the top, there doesn't need to necessarily be a plan of all these guys getting together and talking about it.
So you keep talking about this playbook. You've played football.
Yes.
The playbook doesn't always win. It doesn't always work.
It's kicking our ass right now.
But the Patriots had the best. No one's been able to stay on top for so long without interruption. If your breakdown of this ultimate power that's manipulating the world is correct,
yeah, I mean, it sounds so out there, woo-woo, nefarious when you say that, but it's true.
Well, I think listeners and we all got a lot to think about. But
yeah, there's definitely a lot to think about. There's definitely a lot to think about. So either way, I appreciate you guys going along with me on this journey. If you're looking for some further reading or research, if you will, there's a video called All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. Mm-hmm. There's another one called Rich Man's Tricks, which paints a certain narrative. So there's another side to that story. Also on YouTube, if you're looking for just one event, right? And this is where it's like just going into it with perhaps. Then there's for 9/11, there's 2 videos. One is September 11th, the new Pearl Harbor, and 9/11. The Anatomy of a Great Deception or something like that. It's one that's pretty much the name.
Well, I mean, I agree with you on some points, but I can't totally agree with you on some other assertions. But this has been an amazing interview.
Well, I look forward to next time we could break this down. I think that I'm open to having other people that have counterpoints to mine.
If anyone wants to debate Chase, we can do it on Audio Crack. I'd love to. We could do it live.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be great. I mean, we could bring in other people like engineers, architects. Like I said, at the end of the day, our goal as a species should be truth. Our goal should be empowering ourselves and, being that light that's out in the world because, before you know it, that light of the collective human spirit is going to be squished. So,
well, thank you so much for coming on, Chase.
Thanks for having me.
This has been awesome. Thank you guys for listening. Subscribe, follow on Twitter, Audio Crack Instagram. We hope to have more awesome guests on like Chase. So if you have anyone you'd like on, tag us. This has been an awesome time. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for listening.